Chapter 1452. Castor was flirting with a blonde, and stroking his short beard habitually with his right hand. However, he was secretly sizing up Connie, who was squatting in a corner and drawing circles. Although her head was completely covered by the helmet, that frail and petite figure gradually matched with that princess in his memory. After this period of investigation, he could basically confirm that this employee of Amy's who never showed her face was Princess Connie of the Fog tribe. As an outstanding information provider, his information network was all over the Norland continent, and he had friends all over the world. His motto was that as long as he had the money, there was no information that he couldn't get, and no person that he couldn't find. Before the Fog tribe fell into chaos, he had also provided Gary with a series of information, including the living habits of all the former chief's family members, so as to ensure that Gary's men would be able to capture or kill everyone accurately during the operation. Gary's rebellion was very successful. The chief and his wife were killed on the spot, and his children and supporters were also captured or killed. If that little girl hadn't escaped, this operation would have been another masterpiece on his resume that he could boast about. Unfortunately, the chief forcefully created a way out for her before he died, and allowed her to escape all the way from the Twilight Forest to Chaos City. She also successfully shook off the orcs who were chasing after her. In order to erase this flaw, he came to Chaos City personally, and finally locked onto his target after laying low for half a month. He hadn't found a chance to make his move previously, but he didn't expect to meet her at this banquet today. It was a pretty good opportunity. Gary would officially ascend the throne a few days later. If he could capture Connie and send her to him, it would definitely bring him a sizable income. "Connie, come with me for a while," Meg said as he stood up and walked to Connie, and patted her shoulder gently. "Ha!" As she couldn't eat while wearing the helmet, and it felt weird to talk to people, Connie, who could only squat in the corner and draw circles in boredom, looked up. She quickly stood up and followed after Meg when she saw him walking out. Leaving. Castor watched as Connie walked to the side door. He smiled at the blonde girl he was talking to and signaled that he needed to leave. He walked to the side door quietly. If he could catch her alone, tonight's banquet would be over for him. This guy really isn't a good person. Camilla's gaze turned cold as she watched Castor follow Meg and the others out. She put down the wine glass in her hand and walked towards the side door unhurriedly. "Boss, where are we going? Aren't you going to wait in the banquet hall?" Connie asked softly as she walked behind Meg. "We need to find a small dark room now," Meg said calmly. "Little black room." Connie's expression immediately tensed up, and she couldn't help but slow down a little. She looked at Meg's back nervously and cautiously, and said, "Boss, don't do that. I'm not that kind of person." Meg stopped and turned back to look at Connie. He suddenly realized that this girl was probably thinking the wrong way. He held her helmet with one hand and led her forward as he said, "Someone is following us. We need to find a small dark room to catch him and see what he's going to do." "Is that so?" Connie wanted to turn her head and look behind her. "Don't turn back in case he suspects something." Meg put his hand on Connie's shoulder and raised a finger to press against her helmet to prevent her from turning back. "Oh," Connie responded and stopped moving, allowing Meg to lead her forward. "What are they going to do?" "The banquet is about to start, but they're walking around at this time. Could there be some unspeakable secret between them?" Castor hid in the darkness and looked at the two people who disappeared at the stairs of the long corridor. He had a puzzled expression on his face. After waiting for a while, he quickly followed. The second floor was the office area of the Aiden Chamber of Commerce. Everyone was at the banquet hall now, and the office area was pitch black without a single person. It was a good opportunity to make a move. Castor came to the stairs and listened carefully. After making sure that no one was on the stairs, he walked up softly. He pulled out the dagger at his waist with his right hand and looked a little vigilant. He had the strength of a 6th-level knight, and it was more than enough to deal with Princess Connie. That princess had never cultivated before, so she was just a helpless little chick in front of him. Castor came to the staircase on the 2nd floor. He leaned against the wall and listened carefully for a while. Faint footsteps came from the corridor on the right. He slowly poked his head out of the wall and looked in the direction of the corridor. The corridor appeared in his sight, followed by a huge black shadow. He judged that it was a huge club 1 second before he fainted. Bam! With a muffled sound, Camilla looked at the unconscious Castor on the ground and casually struck the black club in her hand on the ground. She clapped her hands in satisfaction and said, "Done." Meg walked over from the corridor with Connie. He looked at the black club in Camilla's hand and raised his eyebrows. He was also a victim of this black club. Speaking of which, Camilla was indeed very good at sneaking up on people. "Is he dead?" Meg lifted his leg and kicked Castor. "No. How could a professional like me kill him with just 1 hit?" Camilla shook her head as if it was a matter of course. "That's good." Meg reached out and grabbed Castor's collar. He dragged him to the end of the corridor and pushed open the door to the storeroom. After the 3 of them went in, he closed the door again. This was obviously a small room for storing stuff. There were walls on all sides, and it was airtight. It was very suitable for Meg's requirements for a small dark room. Camilla raised her hand to set up a soundproof barrier. At the same time, she took out 2 night luminescent pearls and slapped them on the wall. The small dark room lit up instantly. Connie took off his helmet and leaned in to look at Castor. He frowned slightly. "Why do I feel that this person looks a little familiar? I remember now. He was by Gary's side during the previous banquet. So he took part in the rebellion too." "During Gary's rebellion, he played the role of providing information," Meg said softly. "Bastard. I'm going to kill him." Sharp claws shot out from Connie's fingertips, and he was about to stab Castor's heart. "We need to get some information from him. It won't be too late to kill him after we're done." Meg reached out and grabbed Connie's wrist. He then looked at Camilla and said, "How do we wake him up?" "It's simple. As long as it hurts enough." Camilla lifted her hard and thin heel and stepped on Castor's crotch. Chapter 1453. Ow! Castor almost jumped up from the ground, but before he could close his mouth, a rope was wrapped around his body. With a forceful pull, he was tied to the bamboo in the corner. The pain in his crotch made him draw in a cold breath, and his mind went blank. Meg, who was standing at the side, retracted his leg instinctively. He was suddenly glad that Camilla didn't use this method to wake him up. Otherwise, the story would have gone in a different direction. "Tell me, which way do you want to die?" Camilla asked coldly as she took out a set of leather whips and candles. She raised her hand and whipped Castor's face, leaving a deep bloody mark on his face. Castor was jolted awake by this whip. Although his crotch was in excruciating pain, he still clamped his legs and tried to look at Camilla. He panicked and hurriedly said, "Countess Bartoli, this must be a misunderstanding." Smack. Camilla didn't waste her breath. She whipped him again. Castor grimaced in pain from the whipping. That whip was full of barbs, and every whip brought down a string of flesh. The pain was imaginable. "You're here for me, aren't you?" Connie said to Castor with clenched fists as she walked up to him. "Miss, may I know who you are? There might be some misunderstanding between us." Castor looked at Connie, and tried to force a smile while enduring the pain. His heart had already sunk to the bottom, and his brain was spinning rapidly. He didn't expect to fall into someone else's hands today. "Liar, you're obviously Gary's lackey." I saw you standing with Gary at the Falk tribe's banquet with my own eyes. You're the ones who killed my father, mother, and my family. Connie punched Castor's chin, and a few of his teeth flew out. Cough, cough. Castor coughed out 2 mouthfuls of blood, and looked at Connie innocently. Seems like you've got the wrong person. I don't know you, and I don't know any Gary. I'm just an ordinary merchant. Please let me go. I have parents and children to take care of, you. Connie looked at Castor with hesitation. Did she really get the wrong person? Karst, nicknamed Vulture, from Donsoner town in the Roth Empire. He fled the empire in his early years because he killed his wife in a drunken stupor. After that, he traveled the continent and became an intelligence merchant. He also built a huge intelligence network on the Norland continent that covered all the races. He made a lot of money by selling intelligence and information. Vulture is very mysterious, and very few people know what he looks like. It said that he had changed his appearance many times, and is no longer the same as before. Mag looked at Castor with a smile, and said, "How many more skins are hidden under this skin?" Castor stared at Mag with a deadly gaze. His stiff face was twitching, and there was fear in his eyes. Just as he had guessed, this fellow wasn't a simple chef and restaurant owner. However, from the looks of it now, he might not have the chance to find out his identity completely. Mag saw that Cast had silently agreed to his words, so he continued with a smile, "If you tell me how you helped Gary plot the rebellion and killed the chief of the Falk tribe, I might be able to let you die a quick death. Since I'm going to die for sure, why am I still talking to you? Is your brain kicked by a donkey?" Castor sneered at Meg. "Are you trying to help her take back the chief's position? Let me tell you. You won't succeed. Gary has already controlled the Falk tribe. What do you have to fight with him?" Smack! Camilla's whip landed on him again, and tore off a piece of flesh along with his clothes. Castor was trembling from the pain. Interrogation was one of the things he was best at. However, he never thought that he would be tied up one day, and a whip with barbs would land on him. "Don't talk so much nonsense. Otherwise, I'll use the whip to whip you slowly to death. According to this efficiency, I'll probably need another 1001 lashes to remove all the flesh on your body. But you'll still be conscious at that time, so you can't die even if you want to. I'll use the healing potion to heal your injuries and do it all over again." Camilla looked at Castor with a smile, and her eyes sparkled with eagerness. You can't do this to me." Castor broke down instantly. He struggled to move, but he got another 2 lashes in return. The intense pain came from his wounds. Castor swayed left and right, but he couldn't break free from the ropes on his body. I'll tell you everything." Seeing Camilla raise her whip again, Castor cried out in a sobbing tone. Smack! The whip still landed on Castor's body, and tore off a piece of flesh from his thigh. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect you to be so useless. You can't even last 3 seconds, Camilla apologized without any sincerity. The whip was hanging by her side, and she had no intention of putting it away. Castor grimaced in pain, but he didn't dare to say anything. His gaze landed on Connie, and he said, "Yes, I helped Gary plan that coup. I killed the chief and his wife of the Falk tribe, as well as all the orcs who supported the chief. I was the one who provided Gary with all the information so that he could kill all the orcs who could lead and change this coup with the highest efficiency in the shortest time possible. And you were the only accident in this plan. If you didn't run away, I would be sitting in the Falk tribe's palace now, calling Gary my brother, and becoming the Falk tribe's most distinguished guest." Castor clenched his teeth, and roared at Connie, "Why did you run away? You ought to have died with your damned father. What right do you have to live alone?" Connie took 2 steps back instinctively. Her eyes were filled with sorrow and pain. She shook her head and stepped back, not wanting to recall what happened that day. You're not the one in the wrong. Right at this moment, a hand pressed gently on her back to stop her from retreating body. Meg said gently, "Don't worry about it. But father was killed because of me." Connie's tears couldn't stop flowing. She couldn't forget the scene when her father pushed her out of the palace and used his body to block the door. If it weren't for her, her father might have been able to leave. Endless self-reproach surged in her heart. Seeing you survive is your father's greatest consolation. Meg shook his head. He pointed at Castor and seriously said, "Killing these bad people, avenging your parents, and saving your brother is what you should be doing next. If you can't even withstand the enemy's verbal attacks, what right do you have to go back?" Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1454. The door to the little dark room closed slowly, and everything in the room returned to its original state. Apart from a puddle of water that was drying up in the corner, the cleaners wouldn't notice anything unusual when they came to retrieve the tools tomorrow. "Boss, how did you know that he knew where my brother was locked up?" Connie kept the hand-drawn map in her pocket, and pressed Mag down with a bewildered expression. She already knew what she had to do next, and her sharp claws pierced into that bastard's heart. "Firstly, we can't be sure if this map is real. This could also be a trap set by him after he knew he couldn't escape today, so we can only believe half of it. Secondly, what he said just now is the real purpose of our trip. If our rescue operation can succeed and overthrow Gary's rule, the things in this photo stone will be the evidence of Gary's crimes, and can help you win the hearts of the people quickly." Meg tossed the photo stone in his hand to Connie. "This pervert indeed has a photo stone with him all the time." Camilla looked at the photo stone that Connie caught, and was even more certain of her thoughts. Meg didn't mind Camilla's gaze. He looked at Connie, and said, "However, since even he could recognize you based on your body shape, I'm afraid you can't go with us even if we obtain the legal identity to go to the Falk tribe. Once you're recognized, the operation will fail." Connie nodded. "Let's go. The banquet is about to start." Meg went downstairs first, and music could already be heard from the banquet hall. The Chamber of Commerce's year-end banquet was naturally full of flattery. First, the 4 major families that founded the Aden Chamber of Commerce were lavishly praised. Then, a few separate awards were given to the businessmen who had made great progress in the past year. The atmosphere was rather lively. Meg sat in a corner and watched this scene with interest. He recalled when he was young, snuggled in his mother's arms, and sat in the front row to watch his family's company's year-end banquet. At that time, the company was not big and there were no celebrities. His father would go on stage and sing with the employees. It was not very exciting, but it was humane and the employees were the main characters. Later on, the venue became bigger. The various lights on the stage were the same as a concert stage, and A-list singers were invited. Although it was lively, the end-of-year celebration did not seem to have much to do with the employees. Therefore, he did not attend it again. "Father, do you want to try this fruit? It's sweet and sour. It's super delicious. After eating it, your teeth will turn purplish red." Amy ran over to Meg with a small fruit platter. She grinned, revealing a mouthful of purplish red teeth stained by the fruit juice. "Look at your purplish red teeth." Meg smiled. Then, he looked at the pea-sized purplish black fruits in the small fruit platter. They looked a little like blueberries. Before he reached out, Amy had already grabbed one and tiptoed to feed it to him. Meg opened his mouth and took the small fruit. With a light bite, the thin fruit skin burst open, and the sweet and sour taste bloomed. The texture and taste were between grapes and blueberries, and it was indeed quite delicious. "Is it delicious?" Amy asked expectantly. Yes, it's sweet and sour. It's really delicious. Meg smiled and nodded. He reached out and patted Amy's head. Go and play. Don't run around and don't bump into others. Yes, yes. Then I'll leave this fruit platter here for you to eat. Amy nodded obediently and placed the small fruit platter on the table in front of Meg. Then, she skipped away. Little one. Meg's gaze followed Amy the whole time. He knew that she had met up with the children. Gina had already become the children's temporary playmate. She was playing with the group of children who had followed their parents to attend the banquet. It was obvious that she really liked children. Camilla sat across from Meg and looked at him as she asked in a low voice, "Let's make a deal. What do you want in order for you to stop pestering my Miss Gloria? There's nothing between us." "You can't talk nonsense and ruin our reputation," Meg said calmly as he tossed a fruit into his mouth. "Do you think I'll believe you if you say that?" Camilla rolled her eyes. "It's up to you to believe it or not. If you like her, then go after her. If you don't even have the courage to do that, then what's the point of attacking an imaginary enemy? If you don't know how, then beg me to teach you," Meg said with a smile. "Humph. Who needs you to teach me? She's going to be my woman sooner or later." Camilla snorted, and turned her face away. She did want to pursue her, but her previous actions seemed to have scared Gloria. Not only did it not have any positive effects, it even seemed to be pushing Gloria towards Meg. Although she turned her face away, she couldn't help but glance in Meg's direction. She thought to herself, this fellow is a little perverted, but he does seem to be quite attractive to women. Could it be that he really has some secret trick? If I learn it, will I be able to change Miss Gloria's opinion of me? Thank you to all the members of the Chamber of Commerce for your support and contributions to the Aden Chamber of Commerce in the past year. You've allowed the Aden Chamber of Commerce to enjoy a good reputation on the Norland continent. I also wish all of you a prosperous new year." As the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Jeffrey concluded the commendation banquet with a speech. Warm applause rang out from below the stage. Most of the members of the Chamber of Commerce were glowing with pride. Jeffrey was ready to leave the stage after his speech. "President, please wait." Right at this moment, Cyril, who was sitting near the center of the stage, stood up and walked up to the stage. He looked at Jeffrey and said, "Today is the Chamber of Commerce's year-end celebration. According to the rules of the Chamber of Commerce, if there are important matters, we can start a board meeting, right?" Jeffrey furrowed his brows slightly as he looked at Cyril. Everyone's eyes also fell on Cyril. Apart from the board members, the normal members of the Chamber of Commerce didn't know what Cyril wanted to do. He actually proposed to start a board meeting. As one of the board members of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, I believe that Gloria, who was recently promoted, is not suitable to be a board member. Her qualifications and abilities are not enough for the position of a board member. Furthermore, her previous promotion was not discussed and voted by the board, so it is suspected that she violated the rules. Cyril looked at Jeffrey and loudly said, "Therefore, I propose to the president to call for a board meeting to vote on whether to let Gloria continue to be a board member of the Chamber of Commerce. If more than half of the votes are against it, according to the rules of the board, she will be stripped of her board member position immediately." The banquet hall instantly fell silent. All the guests looked at the father and son standing opposite each other on the stage with strange expressions. Chapter 1455. Cyril wants to dismiss Gloria. Has the family Moreton's power struggle become public? This year's end-of-year celebration seems to be quite interesting. It sounds like it's in line with the rules, but is Cyril planning to challenge Jeffrey's authority? The guests discussed in low voices. The annual end-of-year celebration was quite boring for most people, but this year seemed to be a little different. Is the show about to begin? Meg calmly crossed his legs and held a small plate of fruit, ready to watch the show. He was quite confident in Gloria. The girl's expression was also very calm, so she most likely had some confidence. As for Cyril, Meg felt that if Jeffrey's brain wasn't damaged, he should learn from the old man of the Buffett family. No matter how bad it was, he shouldn't hand over power to Cyril. That wastrel could squander this huge family business in minutes. The most frightening thing was that he didn't have the slightest bit of self-awareness. He thought that he had everything under control with a little bit of cleverness. Everyone looked at Jeffrey. As a director of the Chamber of Commerce, Cyril proposed a board meeting to vote on Gloria's departure. It was within the rules, but Jeffrey was the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, Cyril's father, and Gloria's grandfather. Would he agree to this board meeting that represented the family's internal strife? At this moment, Gloria, who was sitting in another direction, stood up and walked to the edge of the stage. She first bowed to Jeffrey, and then said, "Chairman, if Director Cyril and some of the other directors think so, I agree to vote according to the rules of the board meeting. The result of the vote will determine whether I can continue to be a director of the Chamber of Commerce or not." Everyone's eyes lit up when the main character stepped onto the stage. The guests who were waiting for Jeffrey to speak didn't expect Gloria to take the initiative to step onto the stage and agree to Cyril's suggestion. This made everyone think more highly of Gloria. She was a young girl of 17 or 18 years old. Although she was very beautiful, as Cyril said, she was too inexperienced. It had only been a few months since she officially appeared in the public eye and became a director of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Many businessmen who started from scratch wanted to become a director of the Chamber of Commerce, but they had to meet all kinds of requirements before they could do so. However, this wasn't absolute. After all, Miss Hill, who was sitting next to him, was only 19 years old this year. She was already the owner of the largest financial group on the Norland continent, and announced that she would run for the position of the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. The Buffett family and family Moreton were regarded as the twin stars of Chaos City's business world during Jeffrey and Ian's generation. Now that the two legends were old, Ian was no longer in charge of the bank's affairs. He was passionate about fishing, and Jeffrey was still troubled by the matter of his successor. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that it was already difficult for Cyril to hold on to family Moreton's foundation, let alone bring the family to another level like Miss Hill did. Gloria's appearance gave everyone a sense of anticipation. Perhaps family Moreton could have a female successor of the granddaughter generation. The beautiful and generous Gloria won the recognition of the guests with her outstanding appearance and polite and generous manners. Although her aura wasn't as strong as Miss Hill's, she wasn't inferior to her overall. It was a different kind of feeling. As for Cyril, with his gaudy red and green outfit and the smug smile on his face, he looked like a villain standing on the stage with Gloria. It was a little repulsive. Big sister Gloria is so beautiful. Amy held Anna's hand as she looked at Gloria. Yes, she is. Anna nodded in agreement. This uncle is too much. He actually wants to dismiss Miss Gloria, Yabamiya said angrily. All the uncles in this world are the same. None of them are good, Elizabeth said coldly. Jeffrey glanced at Gloria, and a hint of relief flashed across his eyes. He nodded and said, "Since that's the case, in order to maintain the fairness of the board, we will vote according to the rules of the board to decide if Gloria will continue to be a member of the board." Very good. Cyril had a sly smile on his face. He had absolute confidence in this vote. With the help of the Dodges family and the Marquis family, they had almost half of the votes. He didn't think that Gloria would be able to pull away the rest of the votes. "You will be in charge of hosting," Jeffrey said to Menard, and then he turned around and left the stage. Menard walked to the front of the stage and looked at the board members sitting around the stage. He said, "Dear board members, according to the rules of the board, the voting will be done anonymously. Before the voting begins, board member Gloria will have 3 minutes to give a speech. After the speech, the voting will begin. Now, there will be staff members who will hand out the tickets and pens to everyone. Soon, a few staff members came in with paper and pens and distributed them to the board members. Menard then looked at Gloria and said, "Miss Gloria, you have 2 minutes to prepare. Please tell us what you have done for the association after becoming a board member, why you want to be a board member, and what you plan to do for the association in the future." "Okay." Gloria nodded slightly, and quietly waited for the time to come. Her eyes couldn't help but look past the crowd and towards the corner. "Look. Gloria is looking at me." As expected, when she's nervous, the first person she thinks of is still me. Camilla said ecstatically. Meg gave Gloria a warm smile. After Gloria retracted her gaze, he glanced at Camilla from the corner of his eyes. This maiden was so easily flattered. 2 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. All of the board members had already received their pens and papers, and everyone's eyes fell on Gloria. Gloria withdrew her gaze from Meg's warm smile, and felt as if her heart was filled with courage and strength. She bowed slightly to all of the board members and guests present, and then said, "Esteemed board members and members of the Chamber of Commerce, I am Gloria Moreton. I am very honored to be a substitute board member of the Aden Chamber of Commerce a month ago. As the former board member was arrested for breaking the law, the substitute board member's qualifications were revoked. According to the rules, as long as the substitute board member is approved by the president, there is no need for the board to vote, so there is no violation of the rules. During my time as a board member of the Chamber of Commerce, I have felt a lot of responsibility and pressure. The Aden Chamber of Commerce gathers the best businessmen and companies in Chaos City, but it is not only a platform to promote cooperation between businessmen, but also a series of social responsibilities. We have a huge amount of wealth in our hands, so we naturally have to bear the corresponding social responsibilities, and the Chamber of Commerce plays a role in guiding and promoting all of this. During the mid-year meeting, Miss Luna from Chaos School launched a fund to provide education and living assistance for the children who can't go to school, and it received the approval of many people in the Chamber of Commerce. Suede donated a portion of the funds for the construction of the children's school buildings, and also prepared winter clothes for the children. When I saw the pure smiles on the children's faces after putting on the new clothes, I was very touched. To us, this is just a basic living condition, but to them, it is a luxury. The reason I want to become a board member of the Chamber of Commerce is that I want to guide more businessmen to help the children and the poor, so that the residents who are struggling to survive can have a basic living condition. Chapter 1456. I hope that as the Aden Chamber of Commerce grows stronger, it will become warmer and take on more responsibilities. This is the reason why I want to continue being a board member of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Gloria bowed slightly, and ended her speech. The 3-minute speech wasn't long, but it made all the guests stop smiling and fall into deep thought. Warmth. Responsibility. Businessmen are born for profit. If they have these 2 things, they won't be businessmen anymore. Cyril smirked at Gloria. Only a young lady like her would take such an immature idea seriously, and even say it on such an occasion. This last still takes after her father. Jeffrey looked at Gloria with a complicated look in his eyes. Meg looked at Gloria thoughtfully. The vision and plan that she had shown had already gone beyond the scope of just wanting to prove herself in front of Jeffrey. It was a moving plan and long-term goal. This Miss Gloria has a sense of responsibility that is rare among businessmen. If she can become the successor of family Moreton, or even the president of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, she could bring more things to Chaos City. In the VIP seats, Michael looked at Gloria with admiration. Does the city lord mean to help Miss Gloria stay in the board of directors? an official at the side asked softly. Let's do our best to help her. As for whether she can stay, that will depend on her ability. Michael nodded slightly. Yes. That official left quickly. Soon, a waiter walked between the tables of the directors and passed a few small notes without batting an eyelid. Interesting. Hill was also staring at Gloria. An opponent like her would become even more interesting in a few years' time. As for Cyril, she had never seen him as an opponent. However, why does the way she speaks sound more and more like someone? Hill's gaze swept across the crowd, and landed on Meg, who was sitting in the corner. His eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, it was him. Menard came up to the stage again. He looked at the directors and said loudly, Miss Gloria's speech is over. Now, the directors have 3 minutes to think and choose. Write down on the paper whether you agree with Miss Gloria continuing to be a director of the Chamber of Commerce. After 3 minutes, the staff will collect all the votes and check the votes on the spot to get the final result. The directors looked at each other, picked up a pen and paper one after another, and wrote down their choice on the paper. This vote seemed sudden, but most of the directors had already made their choice before they came to the venue. This wasn't just a vote. It also meant that the battle team would win. Although the Dodges family and the Marquis family were not as powerful as the family Moreton and the Buffett family in recent years, they still had a lot of influence. The number of seats on the board of directors decreased year by year. On family Moreton's side, Cyril had visited almost all of the family's directors. He had used both kindness and authority, and his influence was not small. As for the Buffett family, no one knew what choice Mrs. Hill would make, but no one thought that she would side with Gloria. Will Sister Gloria win? Amy asked a little nervously. She had returned to Meg's side at some point and was nestled in Meg's arms. Maybe. Her speech was so moving. Meg smiled and nodded. A kind heart was the most beautiful. Humph, that's my girl. Camilla snorted in warning and muttered to herself. The other people in the restaurant had also returned to Meg's side. After all, Miss Gloria had invited them to the banquet. They were like her family and friends, so of course they would stand on her side. Do you think Gloria can continue to be a director? Deborah asked Lance, clenching her fists nervously. Don't worry. Even if she can't continue to be a director, it's not a big deal. She's a kind child. No matter what she does, she'll succeed. Lance gently put his hand on her shoulder and smiled. He looked at Gloria with gratification. Big sister is the best. I also believe in her. Mickey clenched his fists and said with a serious expression. 3 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. Under Menard's signal, the staff began to collect the voting slips written by the directors. Although Gloria's expression was calm, her hands were already clenched into fists. She stared nervously at the ballot box that was being brought up to the stage by the staff. It's time for the unveiling. You should go back to where you belong. Cyril sneered beside Gloria. He seemed to be certain of his victory. Gloria didn't reply. She remained silent. When she visited the directors, she was given the cold shoulder and received a lot of excuses. Almost no one agreed to stand on her side on the spot. Compared to Cyril, who had been in the Chamber of Commerce for more than 20 years, it was difficult for her to gain the trust of the directors. He couldn't be sure of the results tonight. He could only hope that some of the directors would change their opinions of her and stand on her side because of her short speech. Now, let's invite all the guests here to be witnesses. I will read the votes on the spot. Menard walked to the ballot box and reached into it. He pulled out a ballot and opened it. Then, he said loudly, the first ballot, disagree. A staff member drew a horizontal line on the blackboard at the side. The second ballot, disagree. The third ballot, disagree. The fourth ballot, abstain. The fifth ballot, agree. The sixth ballot, disagree. Menard's voice was steady as he read the votes. There was a clear difference between the agree and disagree sections on the blackboard. The hall was silent. Everyone stared at the blackboard with different expressions. You're still too inexperienced to fight with me. Cyril's smile became more and more arrogant. If this continued, he would win the bet with an absolute advantage. How dare you humiliate me in this kind of place? Let's see how long you can be arrogant. When family Moreton falls. Harvey looked at Gloria coldly. Everything was going according to their plan. How could a little girl be a match for their two big families? When the disagree votes reached 23, there were only 5 agree votes. It was a crushing advantage. It made people feel a little depressed. The guests looked at Gloria with pity. Such a beautiful and kind girl couldn't continue to be a director and was impeached by Cyril. The 29th ballot, agree. The 30th ballot, agree. The 40th ballot, agree. With 12 agree votes in a row, Menard couldn't help but raise his voice. The eyes of the guests lit up again. It didn't seem to be over. This is impossible. Cyril, who thought that victory was in his hands and wanted to find someone to celebrate with, widened his eyes. He suddenly became nervous. Chapter 1457. The yes votes were increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. On the other hand, the no votes seemed to be frozen. Occasionally, 1 or 2 votes would appear. Yes 30, no 30. The guests looked at the yes votes which had successfully tied the yes votes. Their expressions were quite interesting. After deducting the 4 no votes, there were only 3 votes left in the box. This meant that the results were about to be revealed. The winner was still very much in suspense. Although Gloria's expression was still calm, there was a hint of anticipation in her eyes. The extra 5 votes might have been because they were moved by her previous speech. This is impossible. How could she have gotten 30 votes? Cyril was doubting his life. If it wasn't for the fact that the results hadn't been revealed yet, he would have gone up to check if the votes were fake. Harvey and Bowen looked at each other. Their faces were a little dark. They consciously looked at the Hill, who was calmly swirling his wine glass. The only explanation now was that the Hill was completely on Gloria's side. He had single-handedly wiped out the joint efforts of the two families. 2 idiots. The Hill chuckled and looked at Gloria. Her impromptu performance had a good effect. Or rather, Geoffrey had given her some help behind the scenes. Does this mean that she still can't lose her seat? Cyril's twin daughters looked a little ferocious. They thought that they would be able to see Gloria make a fool of herself today. Adding insult to injury was their favorite game. However, the results were now showing signs of turning around. Meg subconsciously sat up straight. He didn't expect that a vote like this could make people nervous. As a friend, of course, he was willing to see Gloria win. He admired her values. There were only 3 votes left. The atmosphere in the banquet hall suddenly became tense. Everyone looked at the box in front of Menard. Menard was affected by the emotions. His expression became a little nervous. He hesitated for a moment, then reached into the box and took out a vote. He opened it with a serious expression and read, the 65th vote, no. Great. Cyril's eyes lit up and he clenched his fists in excitement. There were only 2 votes left. As long as there was one more disapproving vote, the recall vote would be successful. Gloria pursed her lips and looked at the only 2 votes left in the box. She had eliminated all the directors who could possibly vote for her, but she couldn't think of any director who had a reason to support her. However, even if she was voted out of office today, she wouldn't feel too regretful seeing so many board members voting in favor of her. At least it proved that there were still people who agreed with what she said. Under everyone's gaze, Menard took out another ticket from the box and slowly opened it. His eyes lit up as he said, "Agreed." "Great." A childish cheer erupted from the corner. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw Amy nestled in Meg's arms, covering half of her face in embarrassment. Then their eyes lit up. What a cute little girl. 31:31. The suspense was raised again. All the results were hidden in the last ticket in the box. The last vote. Menard reached into the box, grabbed the ticket, and slowly pulled it out. Everyone's eyes followed his hand closely, and they couldn't help but hold their breaths. Disapproving. Disapproving. It must be disapproving. Cyril muttered in his heart. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. After getting Bowen and Harvey's promise to join forces with them, it was tantamount to a formal declaration of war against his father. It meant that Jeffrey had no choice but to let him inherit family Moreton after he removed Gloria from her position as the family successor. But if Gloria wasn't removed from her position as a director today, then his wishful thinking would be completely ruined. Not only would his position in the Aden Chamber of Commerce plummet, but he also wouldn't know how to face Jeffrey. Cyril is an idiot. He definitely didn't ask the directors under family Moreton to vote for him. If he loses today's vote, then all of his plans will be for naught. Bowen's face darkened, and he began to plan for the worst. 67th vote, agreed. Menard calmly announced the result of the last vote. That's great. It's a happy result. A burst of cheers erupted from the crowd, and smiles appeared on the faces of many of the guests. Compared to those board members who held high positions but did nothing but bully normal members like them, young Mistress Gloria was clearly more popular among them. Amy's and the others also smiled. She won by a margin of 1 vote, but in the end, she still won. It's just as I expected. Meg sat back in his chair and heaved a sigh of relief. He revealed an expression that said he had already expected it. That uncle with the green hat's face has turned black. Amy pointed at Cyril with a smile. In the corner of the banquet hall, Mars clenched his fists tightly. Although he was trying his best to control his emotions, he couldn't hide the excitement on his face. Perhaps this was a sign that Gloria had really entered the upper class of Chaos City's business circle, and also a brand new step for him. That's great. Deborah jumped into Lance's arms. Yes, Gloria won. Lance hugged Deborah and wiped her tears with a silk handkerchief as he smiled. Meanwhile, Mickey was already jumping up and down excitedly. Jeffrey, you have a good granddaughter, Michael said to Jeffrey with a smile. I've embarrassed myself in front of the city lord, Jeffrey said calmly, but there was a hint of relief in his eyes as he looked at Gloria. At least this last didn't embarrass him too much today, and also saved his family Moreton from being invaded by the Dodges family and the Marquis family. The voting results are 32 in favor, 31 against, and 4 abstentions. Menard looked at Gloria at the side, and loudly said with a smile, "Congratulations, Miss Gloria. According to the voting results, you will continue to be a board member of the Chamber of Commerce until the next board member election." A round of applause broke out in the banquet hall. Everyone was smiling as they looked at Gloria. Today, all the members had witnessed Gloria officially becoming a board member of the Chamber of Commerce. It wasn't because of her identity as the president's granddaughter, but because she was a young and outstanding businesswoman. Her unique way of thinking and actions had gained the approval of most people. No. This must be fake. There must be something wrong with this vote. Cyril rushed forward and hysterically said, "I request for a recheck of the vote." Revote. Cyril, get down here right now. Jeffrey slammed the table and stood up. He glared at Cyril angrily. Where do you think you are? How can you behave so atrociously? This vote was carried out in front of the city lord and all the members of the Chamber of Commerce. Do you think you can deny it by behaving atrociously? If you continue to cause trouble, I will remove your board member title according to the rules of the board today. Chapter 1458. Hearing Jeffrey's words, Cyril shuddered and came back to his senses. If he was stripped of his position as a director, it meant that Jeffrey had completely abandoned him, and he would be removed from the list of successors. This was something that he absolutely couldn't accept. His gaze fell on the people below the stage, who used to flatter him. At this moment, they couldn't hide their disappointment and disgust. His heart sank to the bottom. Cyril smiled awkwardly and said, "Sorry, I was impulsive. It seems that everyone agrees with Gloria. As her uncle, I'm very happy about this. I also hope that she can become a director of the Chamber of Commerce and make more contributions to the Chamber of Commerce." Cyril's beautiful words didn't receive a positive response. Instead, there was a burst of whispers in the banquet hall. Gloria smiled at Cyril and said, "Thank you, Uncle Cyril, for dispelling everyone's misunderstanding of me. I also hope that you can do something for the children with me. I'll donate 1,000,000 copper coins to the foundation today for the construction of the school building." Cyril's expression looked like he had eaten shit, but he still nodded and said. Gloria continued to smile and said, "Then I'll thank you on behalf of the children. Later, I'll ask Mars to help you with the donation. He's in charge of the connection between the Suede and the foundation, so he's more familiar with this aspect. You just need to give him the invoice, and he'll help you with it." "Okay." Cyril nodded with a dark expression, then he turned around and quickly walked off the stage. Today was a great humiliation for him. He lost both his wife and his soldiers. The problem he had to consider now was not how to remove Gloria, but how to restore his position in Jeffrey's heart. Gloria wasn't in a hurry to step down from the stage. She wasn't too excited about winning the vote either. Instead, she said sincerely, "Thank you all for voting for me. I accept this result with both surprise and fear. However, taking advantage of the end-of-year meeting, I would like to appeal for the children who haven't been admitted to school yet. The students of Chaos School were going to have their holidays soon, which meant that a new semester was coming soon. There were at least 50,000 school-age children in Chaos City who couldn't go to school, and with the funds raised by the foundation and the expansion of Chaos School, they could only accommodate 5,000 new students, and there was still a huge shortage of teachers. Those children who could not enter school, unless they had outstanding talent, most of them could only do the most basic physical labor because they did not study. This was unfair to them. If the members of the Aiden Chamber of Commerce are interested in providing assistance to these children, you can directly look for Teacher Luna or me. I hope that we can do our part to help more children enter the school like your children, gain knowledge, and change their destiny." Applause rang out in the banquet hall for a long time, and people whispered to each other about the donation. "Thank you." Gloria bowed to everyone before gracefully making her way down the stage. Soon, there were businessmen who came forward to talk to her. Mars had a notebook and a pen in his hands as he followed beside Gloria, jotting down a name and a sum of money in his notebook from time to time. Count Abraham sat in the VIP area, and sighed as he looked at Gloria, and said, "I've never seen someone like you who would speak up for the education of children in our Roth Empire. Father once said that normal people don't need to be too smart. If they're too smart, they'll be difficult to manage. And those who think they're smart are even more troublesome," Vanessa whispered. After a short pause, she continued, "I don't think that's right." Abraham nodded with a smile, and said, "Those guys think they're smart, I'll just kill a bunch of them from time to time, and that's all. The rest of them are just a bunch of clowns. However, I don't think it's a bad thing to make more people smarter. The truly smart people are civilized. They know the law and abide by etiquette, and they'll maintain order spontaneously, just like most of the people in Chaos City. Know the law and abide by etiquette. Vanessa was deep in thought. After a while, she looked at Abraham and asked, "Then, Uncle Abraham, why don't you suggest to Father to change? His Majesty naturally has his own thoughts. Perhaps what he thinks is right." Abraham shook his head with a smile. He picked up an exquisite pastry and put it into his mouth. After chewing, he said, "I like to eat, drink, and play. I'm just spouting nonsense about other things. Who do you think will believe me? Big Brother Sean and Big Brother Josh don't know how to do that." Vanessa asked. "Sean is more like your father, while Josh is more interested in magic than education. They also like obedient people who aren't very smart." Abraham smiled and said, "You know, interacting with smart people is more tiring than interacting with foolish people." Vanessa looked at Abraham with a confident smile and said, "I believe in you, Uncle Abraham. A civilized empire built by smart people is the future of the Roth Empire." Abraham paused in his chewing and looked up at Vanessa with a hint of surprise in his eyes. However, he quickly tossed the remaining half of the pastry into his mouth and said with a relaxed smile, "You can say that in Chaos City, but don't say it when you're back in Rodu. Especially not to His Majesty. Otherwise, he'll definitely accuse me of bringing you to Chaos City and teaching you bad things." Vanessa smiled and said, "Father said that women shouldn't be involved in politics, and I'm not interested in politics either. However, I think it's good for children to study. After returning to Rodu, I've decided to set up a school so that more children from ordinary families can study." Abraham's eyes lit up, and he nodded as he said, "I think that's a good idea. If you want to set up a school, I'll support you. I'll provide the land and money, and you can build as big a school as you want." "Then, Uncle, are you going to set up a school with me? How can I do that? Wouldn't I be stealing your limelight?" Abraham waved his hand with a smile and said, "I'll just stay in Chaos City and eat hot pot and skewers. I'll just barely make a living." "Uncle, that's too much." Vanessa looked at Abraham with a sulky expression, and her enthusiasm for returning to Rodu to contribute to the education industry was instantly extinguished. "Ahem, you see, I'm old. How can an old man like me travel back and forth?" Abraham said with a matter-of-fact expression. Meg was invited to Michael's private room. There was only Michael in the private room. Michael looked at Mag, who just came in, and smilingly said, "Boss Mag, I have to inform you of something. If everything goes well, the Falk tribe's messenger will arrive at Chaos City tomorrow, and invite you to the Twilight Forest to be in charge of cooking the dishes for Gary's coronation banquet." Chapter 1459. Meg and the rest left the banquet early and returned to the restaurant. Irina happened to be back too. Because they didn't have much to eat at the banquet, everyone had a new meal. They had hot pot, crayfish, skewers, spicy grilled fish, and cold beer. The banquet officially began. Compared to the high-end banquet where everyone carries themselves, I still prefer to eat the boss's delicious food in the restaurant and have fun with everyone, Yabamiya said with a smile as she took a bite of beef. "I also think Father's food is the most delicious in the world," Amy said with a nod as she held a crayfish in one hand. "Did anything interesting happen at the banquet?" Irina asked with a smile as she took a sip of beer. "Miss Gloria, who often comes to our restaurant, was super awesome at the banquet today." Phyllis told Irina about the voting incident at the banquet with an interesting expression. The sumptuous supper ended with everyone burping in satisfaction. "Boss, you all rest early. We've decided to form a group and go to the north of the city to play for a while before going back to sleep." Yabamiya waved at Meg, and the group of ladies left happily while humming a tune. I wonder what kind of scenery the Gentleman League will bring to the north of the city tonight. Meg closed the restaurant's door with a smile. He had something to do tonight, so he wouldn't be attending the Gentleman League's first team-building activity personally. Oh no, ugly duckling. I feel like I'm going to become as fat as you. Amy touched her slightly bulging tummy and looked at Ugly Duckling with a melancholy expression. Meow. Ugly Duckling looked at her and meowed, but its eyes were fixed on the half-eaten crayfish in its plate. You don't have to eat anymore. You'll get fat if you eat anymore. Amy squatted down and confiscated the half-eaten crayfish in its bowl. Meow. Ugly Duckling looked at Amy in confusion. It only ate half of the crayfish, I don't care. Go and run 10 laps around the restaurant now. Amy pointed to the side. Meow. Ugly Duckling shrank back a little. I don't think I'm the one who ate too much. I don't care what you think, I want what I think. Listen to me, there's no need to discuss this. You have to run 10 laps around the restaurant. Listen to me, I call the shots, Amy said with a serious face. Meow meow cat. Ugly Duckling was dumbfounded. Okay, you can start now. Remember to bring my share with you, Amy instructed as she sat down on a stool. Although it was a little reluctant, Ugly Duckling still started to run around the restaurant under Amy's gaze. If we keep running at this speed, I'm going to fall asleep. Irina made her way to Amy's side, and pointed a finger at Ugly Duckling, upon which a furry green ball appeared behind it before quickly rolling toward it. Meow! Ugly Duckling was instantly enraged. It turned into a blur and ran frantically around the restaurant. It finished 10 laps in the blink of an eye, and then jumped into Amy's arms. It poked its head out of her down jacket and looked around carefully. Hey, Ugly Duckling. Look at you. You're usually so lazy, but you run quite fast, Amy said with disdain as she carried it upstairs. The two little fellows were washing up in the bathroom. Meg looked at Irina and asked, how's the arrangement with the night elves? The new dormitory has been built according to the style you built for them previously. However, it's all made of wood. It doesn't look big, but it's big enough to accommodate people. They've all moved in. Irina nodded. I spent 100 million to buy a piece of land from the city lord's castle. We can build houses or factories on it. I also bought a piece of land outside the city for farming. You're really generous. Meg chuckled. However, since the issue of accommodation and land had been settled, these elves could finally settle down in Chaos City. The textile factory had already started operations. As the production increased, the factory's revenue would also increase rapidly. As long as there was a steady flow of water, it would be able to ensure the basic livelihood of these 20,000 elves. However, there were 20,000 elves in the Night Elves now, so the textile factory didn't need so many people. Hence, the other factories could also start production so that these laborers could be used effectively, and they could also be paid for to obtain more happiness. Is the City Lord's castle willing to give them the legal status of Chaos City's residents? Meg asked. The City Lord's castle's request is that they can apply for legal status as long as they can get a fixed job. Irina nodded. The conditions that City Lord Michael proposed are indeed very favorable. Meg could understand Michael. Not only did he have to bear the pressure from the Wind Forest, but he also had to consider the feelings of Chaos City's residents, as well as the possible instability brought about by 20,000 elves entering the city. Finding a fixed job would mean that the new elves would have the ability to survive in Chaos City, and the risk of accidents would be minimized. But it's not easy to find 20,000 jobs. Are we going to let them go on the streets to look for jobs? Irina frowned. Leave the jobs to me. Don't let them occupy the jobs of Chaos City's residents. This might cause new conflicts, and cause the residents to be disgusted. Meg shook his head with a smile. Irina looked at Meg. After pondering for a while, she smiled and said, "All right, I'll leave it to you." "Father, aren't we going to beat up the bad guys tonight? Can I wear my black clothes and go beat up the bad guys?" Amy asked expectantly as she leaned in Meg's arms to dry her hair after taking a shower. "We won't be going tonight. Let's go tomorrow night." Meg shook his head with a smile. He helped Amy and Anna dry their hair, and then told them a bedtime story. After the two of them fell asleep, he went to the study, took out a pen and paper, and began to draw the blueprint. Although the factory's plan had already taken shape in his mind, he still needed a detailed plan before it could be completed. The details were very important. North of the city. "Little girl, don't be afraid. We're really gentlemen. We just feel that it's very dangerous for you to walk on the streets alone, so we want to send you home," 7 to 8 uncles said gently as they surrounded a shivering little girl. I just came out to buy some things." The little girl's voice was a little shaky. However, she slowly relaxed when she saw that these strange uncles were just surrounding her without any intention of going forward. She returned to her own house surrounded by a group of people. Bro, give me some space. Bro, you're already sitting on top of me. Aren't there a lot of walls around us? Why do you have to come here? No. Bro, you don't know that there are 2 layers of people on the walls. There are too many gentlemen, and I'm a little scared. Just squeeze a little and give me some space. The Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1460. The Gentleman Alliance's recruitment order made the north of the city particularly lively tonight. Because there were too many gentlemen who were summoned, the uneven distribution of criminals was greatly magnified and caused some disputes. In the southwest corner of the slums in the north of the city, a skinny half-orc with a wretched appearance was curled up in the corner, looking at the dozen or so gentlemen surrounding him with fear. However, these gentlemen had not done anything to him yet. Instead, they were arguing among themselves. "Brother, I saw this thief first. He should belong to me," a tall knight said righteously. No. Everyone has eyes. How can you say that you saw him first? If I didn't yell, he would have reached out his evil claws to that little girl, a muscular demon said while shaking his head. I don't care. He was knocked down by my slippers. That's my trophy. You shouldn't fight with me, an orc argued while putting on his shoes. I saw him first. I wanted to catch him. Everyone was arguing, and the atmosphere was very tense. It felt like they were going to fight to determine the winner. The orc was stunned when he heard that. How did the world suddenly change? The slums in the north of the city, which had been completely ignored by the city, suddenly had these strange fellows. After a while, he asked weakly, "Can I go now?" "Get lost." Everyone gave him a kick at the same time and kicked him back to the corner. Then, they continued to fight for the ownership of this stupid thief. You can kill me." After being surrounded and fighting for ownership for half an hour, the stupid thief finally couldn't help but explode. He knelt on the ground and cried bitterly, "I just wanted to snatch a candy." "It's just a candy." The scene was silent for a moment. Everyone looked at each other. "You think you're in the right to snatch a candy?" The irascible orc kicked him over. "Don't you know what you look like? You came out in the middle of the night to snatch a little girl's candy. What if you scared her?" The knight gave him another kick. "If we didn't appear, you might not have just wanted to snatch a candy. Didn't this knife fall from your body? The smell of fresh blood on it doesn't seem too old. You must have stabbed someone with this knife not too long ago." An elf picked up a short knife from the ground. That's just something I picked up." The half-beast man's gaze was obviously evasive. The horseman stepped forward and looked at the crowd. All right, there's so many of us. We won't be able to get anything out of it. We can't just split a leg or a few pounds of meat, right? Let's come up with a list and send this guy to the Grey Temple. They are more experienced than us in interrogating people. All right. Everyone nodded in agreement. They found a pen and paper and wrote a name list. Then, two of them tied up the half-orc and sent him directly to the Grey Temple. The same thing was happening in the dark corners of the northern part of the city. Overall, there was a situation where there were fewer thieves and more gentlemen. Often, a group of gentlemen would argue for half an hour over the ownership of a thief. There were even cases where the thief could not bear the pressure and committed suicide. Apart from the gentleman alliance that came spontaneously, the city lord's castle and the Grey Temple had also sent a few more patrol teams with prison wagons to make it easier for the gentlemen to directly hand over the captured criminals. Captain, the gentleman alliance caught more criminals in a night than we did in a month. A young inspector from the Grey Temple exclaimed to himself as he looked at the 3 wagons full of criminals. These fellows are usually very sly. They know our patrol routes and timings, so it's very difficult to catch them. However, this gentleman alliance that suddenly appeared made use of the human wave tactic to make them unable to hide. It's indeed very effective. That captain nodded. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at those criminals in the prison wagons. There are a few big fish in there that have been giving us headaches for a long time. Once we're done with this round, Chaos City will become a lot safer. The mysterious person who started the Gentlemen's Alliance is really admirable, the young inspector praised. People who can take the initiative to maintain order in Chaos City are all admirable, the captain said with a nod. That night, although many tiles in the old houses in the slums in the northern part of the city were crushed, the people living there had a good night's sleep. Most of the gentlemen had already left in the latter half of the night, but there were still some who stayed until dawn. They guarded Chaos City at night. The morning sun shone on the gentlemen who were curled up on the wall with their eyebrows stained white by the frost. A smile appeared on their tired faces as they got up to shake off the frost on their cotton-padded clothes before disappearing from the wall. In just one night, the Bawtai prison cells were already in a state of emergency because of the overcrowding. Meg also stayed up the whole night. When the morning sun shone in through the window, he realized with a start that he had already spent the whole night drawing. It's indeed not easy to be a drawing dog and a writing dog. Meg cracked his neck as he cracked his neck. He got up to tidy up the messy drawings on the table according to their order, and flipped through them before putting them back on the bookshelf. The drawings for the machinery and factory were already done, but the specific process had not been written down yet. He could only take some time out during the day to do that. He raised his hand to look at his watch. It was already 6 a.m. It seemed like there was no time to catch up on sleep. He stretched his back and warmed up his body. He went straight to the bathroom for a cold shower, and woke up immediately. Meg now had the physique of a 9th-tier knight, and his body was extremely strong. He had only stayed up the whole night, so he would not be so sleepy. He went downstairs to prepare breakfast for everyone. Mia and the rest also came to the restaurant one after another. They all had light dark circles under their eyes. Why? Didn't you all sleep well last night? Meg asked with a smile as he scooped porridge for everyone. Boss, you have no idea how lively it was in the north of the city last night. Those gentlemen from the Gentlemen's League were so crazy. They simply wiped out all the bad guys and criminals in the north of the city. We searched for the whole night, and only caught 2 thieves who stole the ceramic vats. We were almost robbed, Yabamiya said excitedly. I reckon that they have already caught 70 to 80% of the bad guys in the north of the city last night. I'm afraid the rest don't have the guts to come out and commit crimes, Camilla said. You're a group of 7th tier, 8th tier, and 9th tier magicians, giant dragons, and vampires. Isn't it a bit too much to catch two thieves who stole ceramic vats? Meg raised his eyebrows. He was a bit surprised by the enthusiasm of the Gentlemen's League. He had originally thought that it would be good enough if there were people who would respond, but the results seemed to have far exceeded his expectations. This makes me very troubled. Those bad guys originally belonged to me, but now I can't even compete with them. Connie sighed. He was a little sad. He thought for a while, and his eyes lit up. But, can I ask my master to release those bad guys in prison? Then I can kill them one by one. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1461. After the morning service, Mia and the rest went to the ice cream shop after work. Meg poured a pot of tea, and prepared to go upstairs to complete the proposal. Just then, someone knocked on the door. "You're here." Meg put down the teapot in his hand, and walked to the door to open it. A tall and skinny orc with a pair of black beast ears was standing outside the door. He sized up Meg, and then arrogantly said, "You're the owner of this restaurant, Meg?" "Yes." "May I know what's the matter?" Meg nodded. From this orc's ears, he could basically tell that he should be of the same breed as Connie. However, his genes were too different, and he was a little ugly. "I'm from the noble Falk tribe. You can call me Lord Clower. I'm here on Chief Gary's orders to ask you to head to the Falk tribe to be in charge of the food for Chief Gary's coronation banquet," that orc said to Meg with his nose in the air, waiting for Meg to address him respectfully. Meg pursed his lips, and shook his head. "I'm sorry. The restaurant is very busy, and I can't accept your invitation. If there's nothing else, please leave." "Huh?" Clower was stunned. He looked at Meg in disbelief. This fellow actually rejected Chief Gary's invitation. "You might not know, but our August tribe is the second largest orc tribe. Our status is only second to the August tribe, and Chief Gary is the supreme chief of our Falk tribe. It's your great honor to be invited," Clower said with great emotion. He couldn't wait for Meg to get on his knees in gratitude. "Please help me thank Chief Gary for his kind intentions. The Twilight Forest is a long journey, and our restaurant has too many staff. It's not suitable for you to go. You'll have to hire another chef," Meg rejected again calmly. "A long journey. I heard you went to Rodu to cook for the Roth Empire's King's Palace banquet. Would Rodu be closer than the Twilight Forest?" Clower said with a frown, looking a little unhappy. "After all, the king of the Roth Empire is the only king of the Roth Empire, isn't he?" Meg replied with a smile. "You." Klaus's face changed between green and red. This fellow was obviously mocking the Falk tribe for being second. What they wanted to show off initially became a point of mockery in the blink of an eye. "Let me tell you. It's your honor that the Falk tribe invited you. How dare you, a mere human chef, speak so rudely to me? Aren't you afraid that I'll strangle you to death?" Clower said angrily. He wanted to twist Meg's head off. "Mr. Mac, do you need help?" Baser happened to be patrolling Amy's entrance with Monkey. He looked at Clower cautiously before asking Meg. When Crow saw the gray temple uniform that Barzil was wearing, he recalled Gary's warning before he came, and his expression became unnatural. He smiled awkwardly, and said, "It's nothing. I just invited him to our tribe to cook." Meg didn't fall for Clower's trick, and calmly said, "This orc from the Falk tribe said he's going to strangle me to death." Baser looked at Clower sternly, and said, "Sir, you tried to harm a resident of Chaos City. Please cooperate with our investigation." Clower's expression changed, and he hurriedly waved his hands. "And no, I'm just joking. I'm Clower, the special envoy of Chief Gary of the Falk tribe. I'm specially here to invite the boss of Amy's to the Fogg tribe to cook for the chief's coronation banquet. I respect this Mr. Meg very much. How could I harm or threaten him? Respect? Didn't you just ask me to call you Lord Clower? The Castellan didn't make such a request when he came to the restaurant for a meal, Meg said with a smile. Clower looked at the smile on Meg's face, and clenched his teeth. However, when he thought about how he might have to face Gary's wrath if he didn't manage to invite him back, he could only suppress his anger and squeeze out a smile. Why would I? You can just call me Little Clower. I'm now officially inviting you on behalf of the Fogg tribe. Any remuneration is negotiable, and the Fogg tribe will send you back and forth with a flying steed. You don't have to worry about the journey at all. Little Clower, if your attitude was so good just now, we wouldn't have to talk so simply. Meg nodded with satisfaction and continued, however, my appearance fee is very expensive. According to the restaurant's current business rate, it's 2 million copper coins a day. How many days do you intend to invite me? 2 million copper coins a day. Clower's eyes widened, and he almost cursed out loud. However, he glanced at Baser, who was still standing at the side, and forcefully suppressed his anger. He forced a smile and said, Can you lower the price a little? 2 million copper coins is a little too high. Your Fogg tribe is the second largest orc tribe. Do you even need to bargain with a chef for 2 million copper coins for the coronation ceremony of the chief? That's a little disappointing, Mag said with a sigh. How can that be? 2 million copper coins it is. Since you're going to the tribe a day earlier to prepare, let's count it as 2 days, Clower said with an awkward expression. Before he came, the budget given to him was 100,000 copper coins. What he needed to consider now was how to explain the extra 3,900,000 copper coins when he went back. Meg nodded with satisfaction. All right, you set the date. We have about 12 people here. I will come and fetch you personally in the morning 5 days later, Clower quickly said before turning to leave. I want half the deposit before we set off. Otherwise, we won't be leaving. All right. Clower clenched his teeth as he quickened his steps. I'll let you know the price you have to pay for speaking to me like that when we reach the Twilight Forest. Seems like the customers at Amy's won't be able to eat Mr. Mac's dishes for another 2 days, Baser said with a smile. Baser smiled at Mag. As the captain of the Grey Temple's patrol team in the Aiden Square, he was quite familiar with Mag. I can't help it. There are always invitations that I can't reject. Meg shook his head helplessly. He chatted with Baser for a while before returning to the restaurant. Michael's information last night was very accurate. The people from the Fogg tribe had indeed come. They had personally invited them to the Twilight Forest to prepare Gary's coronation banquet. This meant that they had already obtained the legal identity to enter the Fogg tribe's territory and successfully sneak into the coronation ceremony. It was in line with his expectations. It was easier to deal a fatal blow to the enemy by infiltrating their territory. Since that's the case, let's postpone the husband and wife long slice for a few days. Let it be the finale of the banquet, Meg mumbled to himself as he went upstairs with the brewed tea. Young Master Cyril, according to Master's request, you will no longer be in charge of all the internal affairs of the family Moreton from today onwards. However, your position as a director of the Chamber of Commerce will be retained, Menard announced calmly to Cyril as he looked at him. Cyril slumped in his chair. He shook his head in disbelief, and mumbled to himself, No. Father can't do this to me, can't do this to me. The handover of the specific affairs will begin tomorrow. I hope young Master Cyril can cooperate, Menard said as he glanced at Cyril regretfully before turning to leave. Chapter 1462. In the study of the Moreton Manor. Geoffrey sat behind his desk, and looked at Gloria, who was standing in front of him, as he said, from today onwards, all the family Moritans cloth-related businesses will be under your management. Suede and those factories that you set up don't have to be incorporated into the family's businesses. They all belong to you. All the businesses that you set up and expanded with your own capital will be considered your personal assets. Thank you. Gloria smiled delightedly. Although these were things that Geoffrey had promised before, she was still a little excited after it was confirmed. This meant that she had officially become the manager of family Moritan. Even though the cloth-related businesses were no longer the strongest business of the family Moritan, they still had some say in the Chaos City's cloth-related businesses because they had started out in this area. You earned this through your own hard work. You don't have to thank me, Geoffrey said calmly. A hint of relief flashed across his eyes. He continued, family Moritan's cloth-related businesses have been declining in recent years. They are incurring losses. The Roth Empire has taken over a large portion of the market with their low-priced cloths. What you need to do next is to integrate the complicated channels and streamline the supply chain so that they can continue to survive. I will give you 3 months. If you can't stop them from incurring losses, I will shut down all the cloth-related businesses completely. What if I can do it? Gloria asked in return. Geoffrey looked at Gloria's fearless eyes. He was silent for a moment before he said, then they will belong to you, just like Suede. I will work hard. Gloria nodded seriously. Her eyes were filled with enthusiasm, and she quickly bade farewell. This girl is really like her father. They both have a strong drive. However, she is willing to put this drive into business, while Lance only wants to teach the child. Geoffrey retracted his gaze from the door after a long while. A self-deprecating smile appeared on his face. Seems like I might become the next Ian. This old man is probably already thinking of how to mock me. Mars, I'm going to the Buffett Manor. I need to thank Miss Hill in person. Gloria came out of the study and ordered Mars, who was standing at the door. Yes, Mississippi, Mars smiled and nodded. As he walked, he opened the folder in his hand and said, last night, there were 85 members who registered to donate. The total amount of donations was 13.2 million copper coins. Among them, 8.2 million copper coins have been received. Gloria stopped in her tracks, and pondered for a moment before saying, then after we meet Miss Hill, we'll make a trip to Chaos School and give this money to Teacher Luna. If we hurry up, we might be able to build another batch of school buildings before school starts next year, and enroll more children. Yes, Mississippi. Mars nodded, and then asked, do you want to go to Amy's for lunch today? Although I really want to eat Mr. Meg's tofu pudding, the queue is too long. Let's go after the opening hours. I have something to discuss with Mr. Meg, Gloria said with a smile. I have something to announce to everyone. I have received an invitation from the Falk tribe. They want our restaurant to head to the Falk tribe to be in charge of Gary's coronation banquet, Meg announced during lunch. Yabamiya's eyes lit up, and he said, that's great. Weren't we worried about how to get to the Falk tribe? This way, we will have a legal identity, and can appear at the banquet directly. Everyone was elated too. You have connections in the Falk tribe too. Camilla looked at Meg suspiciously. What's the connection? It's just that I have a good reputation. Meg sighed with a helpless expression. You all have legal identities to go in. What about me? Connie asked worriedly. I say, that's your home. You won't get lost if you go home, right? Meg looked at Connie speechlessly. Moreover, didn't you learn how to move stealthily during this period of time? You can even enter and leave the Bowtie prison as you wish. Is it difficult for you to sneak into your own home? Everyone was also looking at Connie with smiles. That's me. Just in case. Connie blushed, and embarrassedly said, if I get lost, you all have to come and save me. The agreed time is 5 days later. Everyone should prepare in advance. Because there might be some dangerous situations, Phyllis, Anna, Jane, and Raina won't be going with everyone, Meg continued. Phyllis raised her hand and softly said, I think I can do it. Otherwise, no one can help you cut the vegetables. Meg shook his head with a smile. You need to stay behind and be in charge of the night elves' meals. If I bring you along, the canteen won't be able to operate. I will come up with a specific plan in the next few days. Our goal is to save Connie's brother, overthrow the Kingslayer Gary at the same time, and let the Falk tribe return to its rightful rule, Meg said to everyone. Camilla furrowed her brows, and said, I agree with saving her brother, but do you think we can overthrow Gary with just the few of us? As the second orc tribe, the Falk tribe isn't weak. That's great. I was worried that it would be boring to fight if we were too weak. Irina picked up a piece of shiitake mushroom, and paused for a moment before saying, Leave Gary to me. Mr. Meg, are you going out? After the lunch service ended, Meg pushed his bicycle out, and was about to make a trip to the mercenary union when Gloria's voice sounded from behind him. Gloria, are you looking for me? Meg asked with a smile as he turned to look at Gloria, who had just alighted from the horse-drawn carriage. Gloria walked up with a nod, and said, Yes. It's about Suede and me personally. I want to talk to you about some things, and hear your opinion. All right, then come in. Meg thought for a while, and stopped his bicycle at the side. He opened the door and gestured for her to enter the restaurant. Am I keeping you from going out? Gloria asked worriedly. It's all right. I don't have anything urgent to do. Meg shook his head with a smile. Warm steam rose from the pot of black tea. Congratulations on winning the vote yesterday, Meg said with a smile as he poured a cup of tea for Gloria, and placed it in front of her gently. Thank you. Gloria held the cup gently with her hand. She didn't know if it was because the shop was too warm, but she was blushing slightly. The atmosphere was a little ambiguous, so Meg started the conversation first. Is there any problem with Suede? The new clothes are going to be launched soon. Perhaps it's because the beautiful ladies from Mamie's wore them in advance, and it gave the new clothes a good publicity effect. The first batch of down jackets that haven't been launched yet have all been pre-ordered. The factory is rushing to produce the second batch of down jackets, and they might have to expand a few more production lines. Moreover, some customers have reported that the price of the clothes in Suede is too high, and it's not very friendly to ordinary consumers. Do you think I should lower the price? Gloria asked Meg. Chapter 1463. Only things that no one wants need to be reduced in price. No matter how expensive something is, there will never be a shortage of customers willing to pay for it. As for those customers who feel that the price is too low, that's because Suede's target customer base has never been them in the first place. Prices that appear to be normal to their target customer base are not good to them, and that's an issue that cannot be resolved. Meg picked up his teacup and took a sip. He then turned to Gloria with a smile, and asked, Do you think Mamie's needs to reduce the price? Gloria hurriedly shook her head, and said, Mr. Meg's food is so delicious, and it has such amazing effects. You can't find it in Chaos City, or even anywhere else on the Norland continent. Why would we need to reduce the price? Meg smiled, and said, Suede is actually based on the same principle. The unique and innovative design, the unique color scheme, and the very professional craftsmanship are all things that are very rare in the market, and that's why Suede is so unique. Once they leave Suede, they won't be able to buy those cool trench coats, soft and comfortable down jackets, and they won't be able to buy those cool designs. That's why people are so obsessed with Suede. Gloria fell into deep thought. After a while, a concerned look appeared on her face as she said, "But the style of clothes is very easy to imitate, and the fabric that we use is not difficult to find on the market. If other tailors imitate us and reduce the price, won't that impact Suede?" Actually, once a luxury brand reaches a certain level of popularity, the high price isn't because it's a very practical and beautiful piece of clothing. Instead, it's because it represents the brand. That's why I told you to make Suede into a high-end luxury brand. Imitations are ultimately inferior. No matter how good the imitation is, those rich women will still be ashamed to wear high-end imitations, and they won't turn to the imitators. Those high-end imitations target the people who can't afford Suede's clothes. What they wear won't affect Suede in the slightest. On the contrary, when they discover that the real upper-class people only wear Suede, they'll scrimp and try to find a way to own an authentic Suede. That's equivalent to Suede's invisible customers. The core of Suede's competitiveness is the continuous release of new products. As long as Suede can continue to lead the trend, Suede will be able to stand firm, Meg said. Luxury, high-end imitations. Gloria frowned slightly. She pondered for a long time, and her eyes gradually became clear. She looked at Meg and said, "I understand. Suede should focus on high-end and high-quality products. This is already enough to bring a huge market and great profits to Suede. They shouldn't be thinking about making all the money." Yes, but the low-end and mid-range clothing market is actually a bigger market. If we can achieve high-efficiency mass production, reduce the cost of a single piece of clothing, and cover the low-end and mid-range clothing market, the wealth that can be leveraged is unimaginable. Of course, if we want to do this, we have to cut ties with Suede. We have to set up a new brand or multiple brands to operate in different price ranges. Meg looked at Gloria and said, "I've been thinking about this recently. I wonder if you're interested in joining us, Gloria." "Mr. Meg, do you want to change your career?" Gloria looked at Meg in surprise. Before, Meg was only involved in the design of Suede's clothing, but now he was saying that he wanted to cut into the race of clothing production. "Actually, I'm more interested in cooking and clothing design. If I can find a partner who can be responsible for the business, that's naturally the best. That's why I thought of you first." Meg looked at Gloria with a smile. His eyes were filled with trust and expectation. Meg had always enjoyed working with Gloria. In addition, he saw the temperament of a business leader in her. As long as she was given some time and opportunity, she would definitely become a business giant on her own. He was more suited to the role of an angel investor. "You thought of me first." Gloria looked at Meg. Her heart trembled slightly at the sight of his gentle smile. Her blush deepened as she asked in a trembling voice, Do you have any plans?" Meg nodded and said, "I recently built a spinning factory in the northern part of the city. It's already in production. With the help of the new spinning machines, the spinning efficiency has been greatly improved. Recently, I've been planning to build a weaving factory and a garment factory in the northern part of the city. As for the garment factory, I'm planning to produce low to mid-range clothing in batches. The target audience is the middle and low-income people, who are the most numerous. I want them to be able to wear high-quality but inexpensive clothing. However, the garment production is only one aspect. How to sell the finished clothing and establish a wide enough distribution channel is the most urgent problem I have to solve at the moment. I know that family Moreton's cloth industry used to be very popular on the Norland continent. You should be in charge of that industry now, so I want to know if we can cooperate in the distribution channel. Through your channel, you can distribute the clothing produced by my factory. It's going to be underwritten by our channel." Gloria was taken aback. "Is there a problem?" "And no." Gloria shook her head, and then said, "My grandfather just handed over the entire family's cloth industry to me this morning. He also gave me 3 months to reform the entire industry, including streamlining the distribution channels and consolidating the industry so that it would stop losing money. The other reason I'm here today is to ask you about this problem. Meg was also taken aback when he heard that. What a coincidence. He thought for a moment and said, if that's the case, I suggest you shut down the loss-making manufacturing process in the industry chain, strengthen the distribution channels, and focus on the distribution of our factory. According to my plan, our factory will enter the mass production stage in a month's time. We can provide a considerable amount of finished clothing. As long as the distribution can keep up, it should be able to bring you a good profit. All right, I'll start working on this when I get back. Gloria nodded. Shouldn't you have some doubts? Meg asked with a smile. I believe in Mr. Meg, and I think this is indeed a very wide market. Mr. Meg is willing to trust me and give me this opportunity. What's there to doubt? Gloria said with a smile. Meg looked at Gloria's beautiful smile, and his mood lightened up. He smiled and said, I'll draft the specific cooperation proposal in the next 2 days. We'll discuss the details then. I reckon you'll be busy for a while. After all, the reform of an established industry like this is the most troublesome. Chapter 1464. After ending the pleasant conversation with Gloria, Meg made a trip to the mercenary union. To his surprise, even though many gentlemen answered the summons to the north of the city last night, and were very effective, and even left their names on the gentleman's roll, none of them received the reward. The number one was, irascible helmeted maiden. Meg raised his eyebrows. He felt that things were not that simple. Was this the style of the teenage girls giving themselves nicknames now? The initial fund of 5 million had now become 8.5 million. It increased by 3,500,000 overnight. It was clear that everyone was very supportive of this project. Moreover, Meg had also received some feedback. The most popular one was the problem of there being too many gentlemen and too few thieves. This problem, he had no solution, right? He couldn't possibly create a bunch of thieves for these gentlemen with excessive hormones to play with, could he? I heard that the Bawtai prison was stuffed full yesterday, and they barely managed to lock up all the criminals caught by the gentlemen. Mr. Mac, you are a real gentleman. Cartera looked at Meg, and gave him a thumbs up. The young lady in charge of the administrative matters also looked at Meg with admiration. You flatter me. Meg waved his hand modestly. He was not a gentleman, he was just an ordinary man. He asked Cartera, can the Gentlemen's League be set up as a loose mercenary group without any complicated rules and restrictions? We just need to do a simple count of the gentlemen who want to continue to eliminate the criminals, and then set up a stable long-term rotation mechanism to maximize efficiency. Cartera pondered for a while, and nodded. Although there is no precedent, this is not against the guild's rules. If other mercenaries are willing to join, then there is no problem. Meg smiled. I wonder if the guild can help with this. I can pay a management fee. Cartera waved his hand with a smile, and said, you don't have to pay the management fee. It's our duty as a mercenary guild to contribute to the stability of Chaos City. I will personally take charge of this matter in the next 2 days, but whether the gentlemen are willing to join our mercenary team is still unknown. Meg and Cartera discussed some details about setting up the Gentlemen's League mercenary group, and after finalizing the general framework, they returned to the restaurant. Amy played with the lotus-shaped fireball in her hand, and asked Crassus, Master, are we going to have a holiday soon? Crassus was stunned. He quickly smiled, and said, well, Chaos School is not on holiday yet, so we are not in a hurry. Little Amy, there is everything in the magic room. You can play with whatever you want. Just tell Master what you want, and I will get it for you. I want to play with my friends. I want to eat a lot of good food. I want to lie in bed and sleep. Is that okay? Amy asked Crassus as she blinked. Well. Camilla's eyes widened. Wasn't that something that could only be done during the holidays? She didn't know how to continue the conversation. Humph. Big liar. Amy snorted. She put the fire lotus in her hand into the small crystal bottle, and then screwed the cap shut. The palm-sized golden red fire flickered in the crystal bottle, and lit up the crystal bottle very beautifully. Little Amy, why did you put the fire lotus in the small bottle? Crassus tried to change the topic awkwardly. I want to blow up the school, Amy said seriously as she placed the small bottle on the shelf. Gasp. Crassus looked at the small crystal bottles on the shelf. There were almost 100 of them, and all kinds of flames were shining in them. He couldn't help but gasp. If all these small bottles were to explode at the same time, not to mention their magic lab, even half of Chaos School would be blown up. Crassus hesitated and said, Little Amy, we're learning magic. We're not going to blow up the school. Look at how cute this school is, and how cute this magic lab is. If we blow it up, pfft. Amy burst out laughing. She looked at the nervous Crassus and said, Master, I lied to you. The school is so cute. Why would I blow it up? You said before that we can't hurt the innocent. We can just blow up whoever doesn't have a holiday. Why do we have to blow up the school, right? Right. No. Crassus looked at Amy, who was smiling brightly, and sighed silently in his heart. It seemed like his plan to delay the holidays was not going to work. Furthermore, we're going out to play in a few days. We have another holiday, Amy continued. What? You're going out to play again. Are you going to ask for leave again? Crassus's expression suddenly became a little nervous. Amy covered her mouth. Oh no, she accidentally spilled the beans. This Mr. Mac doesn't run the restaurant properly, and only thinks about taking the children out to play every day. He doesn't care about the feelings of us teachers at all. I have to have a good talk with him tonight, Crassus thought to himself. This problem was too serious. Ding, 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 the Chaos School's dismissal bell rang. Master, I'll get going first. I'm going home with Daphne and Ignatzu today, so I won't be going with you. Amy slipped down from the high stool, and grabbed her little bag that was hanging at the side. She flung it over her back, and skipped toward the door. I can go with you, too, Crassus said to Amy's back. No, you're too old. You'll pull up our average age, Amy said without turning her head. Then, the sound of the door closing could be heard. Who said that? I'm still quite young. Crassus grumbled bitterly. Amy. Daphne stood at the school's entrance, and waved at Amy as she called out. Ignatzu followed beside her, and the green bean sprout on his head swayed along with her. Daphne. Amy skipped over, and gave Daphne a hug first. Then, she reached out to pluck Ignatzu's green bean sprout, and smilingly said, Let's go to my house to play. The green bean sprout on Ignatzu's head swayed left and right, but he didn't care at all. Instead, he looked at Amy expectantly, and asked, Can we continue to watch Cat and Mouse? Yes, they've been locked in that box for a week. Will that little mouse be eaten by that stupid cat? Daphne also asked with concern. It's okay. When I woke up this morning, I specially opened the box to take a look. That stupid cat still hasn't caught the little mouse. Amy shook her head. Phew, that's good. Daphne and Ignatzu heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. However, Ugly Duckling seems to be interested in that little mouse recently. When I woke up this morning, I saw it biting the box, Amy said. No, then we have to teach it a good lesson. The little mouse is so cute. How can it be eaten raw? Daphne said with a serious expression. Amy thought about it seriously and said, yes, if it's roasted until it's golden brown, and then sprinkled with some chili powder and pepper, it'll probably be super delicious. Chapter 1465. Father, I'm back. Amy's voice came from outside the door. Meg opened the door and smiled at Amy, who was wearing a little magician's robe and carrying a small backpack, as well as Daphne and Ignacio, who were standing beside her. Hello, Uncle. Daphne and Ignacio looked at Meg at the same time. Daphne and Ignacio are here too. Come on in. Meg smiled and stepped aside to let the three children in. Amy skipped to the counter, took off her little backpack, and tiptoed to hang it on the hook on the wall. However, even when she tiptoed, her little hand was still about half a meter away from the hook. Meg walked up with a smile, took the backpack from Amy, and hung it on the hook. Father, we want to eat strawberry ice cream. Amy looked up at Meg expectantly. What flavor do you want to eat? Meg asked Daphne and Ignacio. I want to eat blueberry ice cream. Daphne raised her little hand. I want to eat chocolate ice cream, Ignacio said after thinking for a moment. Okay, go wash your hands first. Uncle will make it for you. Meg nodded with a smile and walked toward the kitchen. Amy picked up a little stool and led the two children to the sink to wash their hands. Then we'll go upstairs to play. Amy took the ice cream and led Daphne and Ignacio upstairs. What should I prepare for the three children tonight? Meg murmured to himself. Amy liked to invite her children home to play, and Meg was naturally very supportive of that. After all, it was very cold outside in winter, and there were so many toys in the amusement park upstairs. It was a paradise for children. After everyone finished eating, the bell outside the door rang. Customers who don't know the rules. Meg stood up and walked towards the door. The opening hours had not yet started, so customers generally would not knock on the door at this time. Meg opened the door and looked at the tall and strong young man at the door. He said, business hours haven't started yet. If you want to eat, please line up at the back. I'm not here to eat. That young man shook his head. He took out a folded piece of black and gold paper, and passed it to Meg. I am Chapman. My master, Harris, heard that you are the most famous chef in Chaos City, so he would like to issue you a culinary challenge. This is the letter of challenge. I hope you can accept it and accept the challenge. Harris. Meg raised an eyebrow as he looked at the letter of challenge in his hand. Ever since he defeated the head chef of Dukas restaurant and ascended to the top of Chaos City's chef's world, he hadn't been challenged for a while. However, he didn't know who his opponent was, so he didn't want to waste his time on meaningless things. Harris. Could it be the legendary invincible god of cookery, Harris, who has been challenging over 100 famous chefs consecutively without losing a single battle? Someone exclaimed from the customers in the line. It's really the invincible god of cookery. He actually came to Chaos City. Mr. Mac versus the invincible god of cookery. This is simply a battle between gods. There was a commotion among the customers in the line. Some of the customers who knew Harris were very agitated. Seems like he's a famous chef. Meg pondered after hearing what the customers said. Chapman didn't become arrogant because of what the customers said. Instead, he looked at Meg and explained, Master respects every chef. The challenge is just to learn from each other. He hopes to improve his culinary skills through the duels with different chefs. Meg flipped open that letter of challenge right away. The content was very simple. There were only 3 big words on it, and the time of the challenge, tomorrow. This is interesting. Meg raised his eyebrows. This clean and neat style piqued his interest in that so-called invincible god of cookery. He kept the letter of challenge and said to Chapman, "I accept this challenge. The time will be set at 10 a.m. tomorrow. The location will be at Mamie's entrance." "All right. I will pass on your message. I will be there on time tomorrow." Chapman nodded and turned to leave. Meg took the letter of challenge and went into the restaurant. He closed the door behind him. Mr. Mack really agreed. "Seems like I have to take leave tomorrow morning. The invincible god of cookery versus Mr. Mack. I feel like this duel is enough to be recorded in the history of foodies. Speaking of which, Mr. Mack has never been defeated before. So, who will be the final winner of this duel? This is really making me curious." The customers discussed excitedly. Abraham looked at the agitated Vanessa curiously, and asked, "Is that Harris very powerful?" "Uncle, you said you know everything about food. You don't even know about Master Harris. You're simply an unqualified foodie." Vanessa rolled her eyes with disdain. Then, she said as if she knew everything, "Master Harris was born in the Roth Empire. He became famous at a young age because he was good at cooking. He was invited by the dwarf chief to Isen Castle to be the head chef. He honed his culinary skills in the castle for 30 years. After that, he started to travel to all the races on the Norland continent, and challenged those famous chefs. In the 10-odd years that he was traveling, he had defeated a total of 145 famous chefs from all the races. Almost all of them were the top chefs on the Norland continent. The most impressive thing is that his culinary skills continued to improve during his travels and challenges. Very few people could taste the food that he made, but all the chefs that lost to him were convinced. He's that good." Abraham's jaw dropped. He thought for a while, and said, "Then, how does Mr. Mack compare to him? Will he lose?" "Among all the chefs that I've met, Mr. Mack is the best. However, I've never tasted Master Harris's dishes, so I don't know what the result would be if the two of them were to fight." Vanessa shook her head, and excitedly said, "Anyway, no matter what the result is, this would definitely be an exciting battle between the best." "Father, what's that in your hand?" Amy asked curiously. "A letter of challenge." Meg walked to his seat with a smile, and opened the letter of challenge for everyone to see. "A chef issued a challenge to me, and I accepted it. Oh, another poor uncle is going to lose his shop," Amy said pitifully. "Perhaps there's an additional sum of money." Yabamiya also said with a relaxed expression. "I heard that the other party is a very good chef." "Perhaps it's not that simple," Meg said with a smile as he kept the letter of challenge. Chapter 1466. Have you heard? Mr. Mack from Mamie's is going to have a culinary duel with the invincible god of cookery, Harris, at noon tomorrow. Is that true? But who is the invincible god of cookery? It sounds like a big name. Nonsense. That's an existence that represents the top chefs on the continent. Tomorrow will definitely be a very exciting duel. Shall we go and watch it together tomorrow? The news of the duel spread out very quickly, and caused quite a stir in the foodie circle. Harris had been famous for a long time, and was a legend. Meanwhile, Meg was a rising force. He had already made a name for himself in Chaos City and the Norland continent in just half a year. The duel between the two of them represented the pinnacle duel between the old and new generations of chefs, so it naturally attracted a lot of attention. The customers at Mamie's were also discussing fervently. They were all very excited about the upcoming duel. Meg, on the other hand, was very calm about that. He just had to be calm about things like duels. If the other party was a noob who didn't live up to his name, then he could win with a simple fried rice. If the other party was really an expert, then it would be really interesting. It was undeniable that there were still some amazing chefs in this world. However, Meg hadn't met any real experts until now, and that made him feel a little lonely. Wouldn't it be boring if he didn't have one or two opponents to keep him company on his path to becoming the god of cookery? Boss, the kebabs are going to burn if you don't flip them now, Yabamiya reminded at this moment. Oh. Meg looked embarrassed as he looked at the kebabs that had turned from golden to charred black. He quickly flipped the kebabs in his hands over. After the dinner service ended, the ladies bade farewell and left. As they didn't find any chance to catch the culprit last night, they gave up the idea of keeping watch in the north of the city, and left it to the other gentlemen. Amy was tired from playing, and fell asleep before the service ended. She was carried upstairs by Irina, and Anna followed them upstairs. Meg and Gina did some simple finishing work. They pulled down the curtains of the floor-to-ceiling windows, and locked the restaurant's door. Gina, you've worked hard. You should go wash up and rest, Meg said to Gina with a smile. Gina replied, but she didn't rush up the stairs. She looked at Meg, her face blushing slightly. She wanted to say something, but stopped herself. Meg smiled and asked, "What's wrong? Is there anything you want to tell me?" I want. Gina's face became redder and redder, and her voice became softer and softer. I want to ask Mr. Meg to sleep with me. Ha! Meg raised his eyebrows and looked at Gina with a strange expression. The mermaid actually sent him such an invitation in the dead of night. I've been having nightmares for the past few nights. I dreamt that a pair of terrifying eyes was staring at me, as though it wanted to eat me. Gina's expression was a little fearful, and even her voice was trembling. She begged Meg with tears in her eyes, "So, can you sleep with me for a while? Even if it's just for a while. I don't dare to sleep alone anymore," sob sob sob. So this lady was having nightmares. Meg heaved a sigh of relief, but why did he feel a little disappointed? However, looking at Gina's pitiful look, Meg couldn't bear to reject her. But when he thought of Irina, who lived next door, he wouldn't dare to agree to sleep with her even if he had 100 guts. I see. Maybe it's because you've been working too hard these days, so you're having nightmares at night. I'll tell you a bedtime story later. I'll leave after you fall asleep. Meg thought of an expedient solution. She could even read a script, so it shouldn't be a problem for him to tell her a bedtime story, right? Thank you, Mr. Meg. Gina nodded and gave Meg a hug excitedly. All right. Let's go upstairs. Meg finally got rid of Gina, who was wrapped around him like an octopus, and said helplessly. After going upstairs, Meg glanced in the direction of the master bedroom. The door was closed, and Irina and the two children seemed to have fallen asleep. Meg heaved a sigh of relief, but he felt that something was wrong after thinking about it. He didn't do anything, so why did he feel like he was doing something sneaky? Are we going to sleep now? Gina tugged at the corner of Meg's shirt. Because she was nervous, she leaned closer, and a ball of softness was pressed against Meg's arm. Let's take a shower first, Meg replied instinctively. Something didn't seem right. No, we're not going to sleep. You're going to sleep, and I'll stay with you for a while. I'll leave after you fall asleep, Meg reiterated solemnly and retracted his arm slightly to avoid awkwardness. Gina nodded and brought Meg back to her room. More than half of the aqua blue room was occupied by the huge water tank. When did you plant the seaweed and rear the fish? Meg looked at the seaweed floating in the water tank, and there were a few colorful fish swimming in the water tank. He couldn't help but feel surprised. He hadn't entered Gina's room for a while, and he didn't expect her to have modified the water tank into a huge landscaped fish tank. When they came to get the mud casing, I asked them to bring it for me. It looks more like home this way, Gina said. Meg turned around and saw that Gina had already unbuttoned her sailor suit and was taking off her stockings. He quickly turned his face away. This lady was really not particular about her appearance at all. Just as Meg was deliberating his words and was about to remind her that she couldn't change her clothes in front of a man outside the sea, a splash came from the side. Meg looked up and saw a mermaid swimming freely in the water tank. Dozens of colorful little sea fishes were surrounding her as though it was an aquarium show. Plop, Gina swam to the side of the water tank and stuck her head out of the water. She tossed her long, golden red hair back and flashed a bright smile at Meg. "Mr. Meg, do you want to come in and play?" "No, no, no. Forget about that." Meg looked at Gina, who was wearing the school swimsuit, and quickly waved his hand. Who could resist that? If he went in, he would make a mistake. "What story should I tell you?" Meg looked at Gina and pondered. He thought seriously for a while and said, "Then I'll tell you a story about mermaids." "My story?" "No, a story about mermaids." "Mermaids. It means that there are humans on top and fish below." "Yes, a species like yours, but the main character isn't you." "Oh." Gina rested her head on the edge of the fish tank, and her tail swayed slightly in the water. She looked at Meg with anticipation. At the very, very deep bottom of the sea. Meg's voice was deep and magnetic. He started to speed up the story about mermaids from another world. Chapter 1467. Prince. Prince Meg. "Please don't leave me." Meg looked at Gina, who was murmuring in her sleep, and curled his lips helplessly. He turned off the light and walked softly to the door. As soon as he opened the door, he saw a half-smiling face. "Are you trying to say that you only told her a story and didn't do anything?" Irina asked Meg with a half-smiling face. Meg was shocked, but he tried his best to remain calm. He closed the door behind him with a smile, and said, "Gina said that she had been having nightmares for a few days and didn't dare to sleep. Out of concern for my employees, I told her a bedtime story. We really didn't do anything." "Ha, I guess you wouldn't dare to do anything." Irina snorted softly. A drop of cold sweat trickled down Meg's forehead. Although that was the truth, as a man, how could he admit defeat so easily at a time like this? Smiling, he said, "You know that I'm actually quite brave." "Is that so?" Irina suddenly pressed her hand on the door frame beside him and pressed him against the wall. She looked at him with a smile, and said, "Do you dare to move?" Meg was half a head taller than Irina. Although he was pressed against the wall, he wasn't completely suppressed. He reached out to grab her wrist, and then wrapped his arm around her waist. He turned around slightly and pressed her against the wall. He asked, "Why wouldn't I dare?" Irina was pressed against the wall by Meg, and their bodies were almost stuck together. His warm breath gently blew on her face, and it gave her a strange feeling. She blushed instantly. Meg noticed Irina's strange behavior and realized that he was floating. He actually pressed against the wall against Irina. If she were to pick up a stool, he would die on the spot. He quickly let go of her hand and took 2 steps back. He coughed dryly and said awkwardly, "So, are Xiaomi and the rest asleep?" "Yes, they fell asleep a long time ago." Irina nodded. "Then you should rest early too. I'll go and draw for a while." After that, he turned and walked to the study at the side. After he went in, he even closed the door behind him. Idiot, idiot, this idiot. Irina looked at the closed study door and stomped her feet angrily. She snorted and turned around to enter the room. Phew. Luckily I'm smart. Meg leaned against the door and heaved a sigh of relief. He felt that his head would have been hit by the folding stool if he had been a second later. Meg made a pot of tea, and went to the study. He had to write a proposal, and now he had to write a proposal about the collaboration with Gloria. It seemed like it was going to be another sleepless night. Would be another sleepless night. Fortunately, Meg knew all these things. It was just a matter of time, and everything else was not a problem. He bought a computer and drawing tools from the system, and his drawing and typing efficiency increased a lot. He should be able to finish everything tonight. Meg went to the washroom at midnight. When he came out of the study, he noticed that Gina's room was left ajar, as if it had been opened. Meg was a little surprised. He had closed the door when he went out just now. Could someone have gone in? Meg tiptoed to Gina's room without making any sound. He stood at the door and listened for a while. There was no special movement in the room. After hesitating for a while, Meg still pushed the door open gently. The light from the corridor shone into the room through the open door. At the end of the light, it landed on a round thing. Meg was shocked. He took a closer look. Isn't this Ugly Duckling? The orange Ugly Duckling was squatting in front of the fish tank and staring in the direction of the fish tank. It was making a soft gurgling sound from its throat. And in the fish tank, Gina was curled up in the innermost corner with her eyes closed. She was shivering as if she was having a nightmare. Meg couldn't help but laugh when he saw that. All right, the case was solved. The so-called scary eyes did exist, but they didn't come from the deep sea. They came from Ugly Duckling, who was on a diet. Those hungry green eyes were indeed a little scary when they blinked in the dark. It would be strange if a fish didn't have nightmares when it was being stared at by a cat while it was sleeping. Ugly Duckling, don't you dare have any ideas about Gina and her little fish. Meg walked in and picked up Ugly Duckling. Looking at Gina, who was still shivering slightly, he pondered for a while. He went back to his room to get a player, and played a soothing piano piece. He placed it beside the fish tank. The gentle piano sound calmed Gina's fear. Meg looked at Gina, whose body was gradually relaxing, and left the room. Meow, Ugly Duckling squatted outside the door and looked at Meg before looking at Gina's room. Its stomach started growling. Let's go. I'll make something for you to eat. Don't go to Gina's room again. She's having nightmares because of you. Meg walked downstairs helplessly. Meow. Ugly Duckling followed Meg's footsteps excitedly and dashed downstairs. Because it was too fast, it missed a step and rolled down the stairs. Meow, Ugly Duckling rested its chin on the floor and looked up at Meg as it meowed aggrievedly. You should go on a diet. Meg looked down at Ugly Duckling, which was almost as round as a beer, and couldn't help but laugh. Although Ugly Duckling wasn't very big yet, and cats were longer, its body size was indeed a little too round for a kitten of its age. Meg went into the kitchen, scooped up a crayfish from the water tank, and boiled it directly with clean water. Then, he removed all the shells, and placed a big bowl full of crayfish roe and crayfish meat in front of Ugly Duckling. Meow gulu, gulu, Ugly Duckling made a gulu sound when it was in a good mood as it ate. Meg looked at it from the side, and his hunger started to surge. Thinking that he still had to work for the rest of the night, he also made himself a plate of Yangzhou fried rice for supper. Ugly Duckling finished an entire crayfish by itself, and rolled around at Meg's feet contentedly. It exposed its belly as if it was inviting Meg to pet it. I'm going to work. I don't have time to play with you. Meg finished the last mouthful of fried rice on the plate, washed the dishes, and continued to go upstairs to draw. The next morning, Gina got up and ran downstairs immediately. She looked at Meg, who was making breakfast in the kitchen, and excitedly said, Mr. Meg, I dreamed of you last night. That pair of scary eyes appeared again. Just when I was forced into a desperate situation, you also appeared. You chased away the scary monster and saved me. Air. Meg looked at Gina. He didn't know how to explain that the scary monster was Ugly Duckling. Could it be that you are my prince? Gina looked at Meg affectionately. Normally, dreams are the opposite. He might not be your prince, but that monster, Irina said with a smile as she appeared behind Gina out of nowhere. Chapter 1468. Is that so? Gina looked at Meg in shock after hearing what Irina said. She didn't seem to believe it, and didn't know what to say to Meg at that moment. Yes, Gina. You're still young, and you grew up at the bottom of the sea. You're too innocent. Some people look gentle and considerate on the surface, but they're actually plotting behind your back to eat you up, Irina said with a smile as she shot a piercing look at Meg with a hint of playfulness and warning. Meg shrugged with a fearless expression, pretending that he didn't know who Irina was hinting at. However, Irina's education was quite reasonable. In order to survive in this complicated and impetuous world, it was necessary to be vigilant and have the ability to distinguish between people and things. Meg couldn't let Gina stay in the restaurant forever. Even if she did, she couldn't stay in the restaurant all the time and not interact with the people outside the restaurant. There weren't many men in this world who were as gentlemanly as him. How many people could resist a mermaid who threw herself at them, invited them to bathe together, and sleep together? Big sister Irina, are you talking about Ugly Duckling? Gina's gaze quickly landed on Ugly Duckling, which was lying lazily on the counter. Although it always looks very sleepy, I feel that it often stares at me as if it's looking for a chance to eat me up. Irina was a little led astray by Gina's turn of events. She pondered for a while before nodding and said, yes, you have to be wary of men like Ugly Duckling. All right, I'll be careful. Gina nodded with a smile before walking towards the kitchen. As she put on her apron, she smiled at Meg, and gratefully said, Mr. Meg, let me help you. Thank you for telling me a bedtime story last night. I indeed slept very well, and I even dreamed of you. It's hopeless. Irina raised her eyebrows slightly as she looked at Gina, who was standing beside Meg. She took out the foldable chair and put it back again. After doing this 3 times, she snorted softly and sat down on the high chair behind the counter at the side. She picked Ugly Duckling up and pinched its fat face wantonly. His mood immediately improved. Ugly Duckling. Oh. Master, how many days do we have to stay in Chaos City? Are we going to Rhoda next? Do the famous chefs of Rhoda need to make an appointment in advance? Chapman asked respectfully as he looked at his master, who was combing his hair with a serious expression. Leave it to fate, leave it to fate. The uncle who only had a small tuft of hair on his head answered casually without even raising his head. Then, do we need to prepare anything for today's duel with Mr. Meg? There's no need for that. Letting fate take its course is my style. He stared at the mirror seriously for a while before reaching his hand out to Chapman, and said, lotion. Chapman took out a small bamboo tube from the bamboo box at the side, and twisted the lid open. He used a small spoon to scoop out a small spoonful of white ointment, and smeared it on Harris's hand. He helplessly said, all right, master. Mr. Mac, I heard you were going to have a cooking duel with the invincible god of cookery Harris this morning. Do you have anything to say about this duel? What dishes have you prepared? Can you reveal what kind of format the duel will take place in? The reporters from the Chaos Morning Post went up to Meg as soon as he opened the door in the morning, and asked rapidly. The customers in the queue also quietened down immediately, and looked at Meg with concern. However, many of them were very interested in this duel. Meg glanced at the voice recording stone in front of him that was shaped like a microphone, and shook his head slightly. The duel will take place at 10 a.m. in the morning. The other party hasn't decided on the specific format yet, so there's nothing to reveal at the moment. I see. That reporter was a little disappointed. After all, he had come to line up 3 hours earlier just to take the first seat in the queue. He rolled his eyes, and immediately asked, "Then, what do you think of Master Harris? I heard that many chefs in the culinary world view him as their idol. What kind of position does he have in your heart?" Meg glanced at that reporter. This young chap looked rather honest, but he was very scheming. He wanted to create big news so early in the morning. As a chef, I respect my peers, and I also admire every chef who is constantly innovating and improving, Meg said with a smile. His answer was flawless. This was obviously not the answer that the reporter wanted. He hesitated for a while, and wanted to ask more questions. "Welcome, Amy's." Meg had already retreated to the side with a smile, and gestured for everyone to enter for their meal. Many customers were still in a hurry to finish their breakfast and go to work. How could they be in the mood to listen to that reporter's questions? The line pushed that reporter into the restaurant. "Mr. Mack, we support you. Our group of sisters will definitely be here to cheer for you in today's competition," a young woman said to Meg with clenched fists. "If we can add a bowl of tofu pudding, we can call you whatever you want us to call you," the sisters behind her chimed in. "My Lolita voice is super nice." An uncle with a full beard leaned his head over, and moaned a few times. Meg had goosebumps all over his body. He solemnly warned, "Uncle, please keep quiet later. Otherwise, I'm afraid the pot in my hand will hit your face uncontrollably. Mr. Mack, you're going overboard." That uncle pouted, and raised his orchid fingers in displeasure. Meg took a few deep breaths to digest this shy expression. What made Meg feel gratified was that other than showing a strong interest in this competition, the customers also expressed their support for him. Ding! New mission, host, please win this culinary competition and make the other party acknowledge you as his master. Mission reward, Master Teacher Talent Point +1, Midas Touch, Enlightening Skill. Punishment for mission failure, acknowledge the other party as your master, and follow him to travel the continent. Right at this moment, the system's voice suddenly rang out in Meg's mind. Meg was slightly taken aback. He digested the information given by the system, and then raised his brows. "System, isn't it too much to ask the other party to acknowledge me as his master? The other party is a top-notch chef known as the invincible god of cookery. Regardless of whether it's his status or cooking experience, he far surpasses me. Even if I beat him in the culinary competition, it's impossible for him to acknowledge me as his master. A mission without a challenge is not a mission. Do your best, host. On the path to becoming the god of cookery, you need to continuously defeat strong opponents and make them sincerely call you daddy." "Sorry, master," the system said cheekily. Chapter 1469. Although Meg didn't know what the system's so-called Master Teacher Talent Points and Midas Touch were, he was a little helpless against the system that pretended to be dead after assigning him the mission. He didn't want to be the disciple of that Harris, whom he had never met, nor did he want to wander around with him. Since that was the case, he had no choice but to defeat Harris and make him his disciple. Lousy system, Meg scolded in his heart. It was already 9 a.m. when the morning service ended. Many customers had left the restaurant, but they didn't leave just like that. Instead, they found a good spot at the entrance and waited for the show that was about to start. For example, that reporter from Chaos Daily, who chased Meg around the entrance, had already climbed onto the high stool that he brought with him. He had already set up a photo stone, and was prepared to record this exciting duel. The Gentlemen's League that appeared at night had dominated the news in Chaos City for the past few days. He was determined to write a different piece of news. The invincible god of cookery versus the #1 chef in Chaos City. Who would win? He had already thought of the title. Shocking. The invincible god of cookery, Harris, who had an undefeated record for over 100 consecutive rounds, was defeated in Chaos City. Was this human nature, or rather, tragic? The genius god of cookery who had won the Best Chef award in the Imperial Banquet actually fell in the hands of the invincible god of cookery. What exactly was this? As an experienced reporter, he had already made a plan, and even prepared the draft in his heart. He could definitely guarantee that Chaos Daily would be the first to report this incident. More and more people came after hearing the news. Many of them even brought their own stools. Come. The front row is selling sunflower seeds, candies, roasted sweet potatoes, and roasted corn. The hawkers who smelled the business opportunity began to sell the essential snacks. The weather was so cold, and so many people were waiting outside. It was indeed a little boring, so many people would choose to buy a hot roasted sweet potato to keep warm in their pockets. Bro, I heard that the 2 chefs today are quite impressive. Have you eaten at Mamie's before? Their food is very expensive, right? A middle-aged man asked the young man beside him softly while holding a sweet potato in each hand. It was so hot that he was clenching his teeth. The young man took a bite of the roasted corn in his hand and looked at him meaningfully. Poverty brought us together. The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. The roasted sweet potato stayed in his hand for more than 2 seconds. His hand trembled and he had to grab it a few times before it fell to the ground. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. He looked at the young man who had a surprised look on his face and smiled awkwardly. You're quite humorous. Same here. The young man grabbed the roasted corn and took a bite to calm himself down. Everyone was eagerly waiting. More and more people gathered around. There were several layers of people inside and outside. There were almost 1,000 people. The door of the restaurant was closed, but the regulars were not surprised. Mr. Mack was always punctual. If he said 10 o'clock, it would definitely be 10 o'clock. It was impossible for him to arrive early. Please make way. At this moment, a loud voice sounded from outside. The crowd parted to make a path, and an old bullock cart slowly drove in. The driver was a tall and strong young man, and there were more than a dozen people in plain clothes behind him. There were young people and middle-aged people, and all of them were wearing old cotton-padded clothes. Apart from the luggage on their backs, there was also an eye-catching black pot. Being Master Harris's apprentice, I really have to carry the black pot. Vanessa got a good seat in the front row, and couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle when she saw the black pot on those people's backs. She wasn't mocking them, but her bright eyes were filled with joy and surprise. No wonder it's called a slow start. Driving this old bullock cart, you can't go fast even if you want to. Abraham's attention landed on the old bullock pulling the cart and the driver, Chapman, as he chuckled. The voices of the people present gradually became softer as they looked at the bullock cart, wanting to see the invincible god of cookery. Chapman stopped the bullock cart slowly in front of Amy's, and looked at the customers who had come to watch. There were so many people here to watch the culinary duel. They had been to many places, and their master had also had culinary duels with many famous chefs. However, this was the first time they had seen such a lively scene. Chapman lifted a corner of the curtain and said, "Master, we're here. We're here." A groggy voice sounded out from within the ox cart. After a while, a large hand stretched out and lifted the curtain of the carriage. The person walked out shakily and stood at the shaft of the ox cart. He stretched his back and yawned. Then, he used his sleepy eyes to scan the surroundings. He was suddenly stunned. His narrowed eyes widened as he exclaimed, "What the hell? Why are there so many people?" The audience looked at the greasy middle-aged man who was standing on the shaft of the cart. He was wearing a cotton-padded jacket that was full of patches and had been washed out. He had a round body and a small tuft of thin short hair on his head, and their expressions froze. It was a little different from what they imagined the invincible god of cookery to look like. Vanessa smiled at Harris and said, "Pfft. This uncle is so cute. Although he's trying his best to widen his eyes, he still looks like he can't find his eyes. Experts usually have their own uniqueness. This Grandmaster has clearly perfectly demonstrated this point." Abraham nodded in agreement. He was also a little shocked by Harris's appearance. However, he had seen many strange people, after all, and did not belittle him because of his appearance. I didn't expect there to be so many people. Let me do it again." Harris turned around and returned to the bullock cart. After a while, he lifted the curtain and walked out with his head held high. He stood on the shaft of the cart in high spirits, and didn't forget to stroke the thin hair on his head. "Master, I saw that you lost a strand of hair," Chapman reminded softly. "Ay. Harris couldn't maintain his expression anymore. He stroked his hair with a pained expression and said, "There are only about 100 strands left. Why did I lose another one? It's so hard for me." Chapman reminded him softly, "Master, we are here to challenge Mr. Meg. It's almost time. We should pay him a visit first to confirm the method and venue of the culinary duel." "That's true." Harris put away his sad expression and waved at the audience. Then, he alighted from the bullock cart and walked toward Mamie's. "This restaurant is really nice." Harris looked up at Mamie's, and his eyes lit up instantly. They had seen countless restaurants along the way, but none of them could compare to this one. Chapman quickly walked forward and pulled the bell hanging on the door gently. Chapter 1470. You're here so early. Meg heard the bell at the door, and instinctively glanced at his watch. It was 9:30 a.m. He brewed a pot of tea, and was about to rest for half an hour. "I'll go open the door." Yabamiya walked briskly to the door. As there was a duel in the morning, the ice cream shop wasn't open this morning, and everyone was waiting in the shop. "Hello, I'm Chapman, and this is my master, Harris. We came early to discuss some specific matters regarding the duel with Mr. Meg," Chapman said to Yabamiya. "Boss." Yabamiya turned around. Meg stood up and walked to the door. He glanced at Chapman, and then looked past him to that bald-headed uncle with squinted eyes standing outside the door. At first glance, Meg almost couldn't help but call him Professor Jean. He was probably a completely bald Professor Jean without his glasses. He was staring at his restaurant signboard with a smile. Of course, it wasn't quite accurate to say that he was completely bald. There was still a small tuft of soft short hair on his head, like an oasis in the Gobi Desert that was still standing strong. All the audience looked at Meg. The main character of the day had already appeared. What kind of format would this culinary duel be carried out in was naturally the most curious thing. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Harris also looked at Meg. His gaze paused on that thick head of his for a while with some envy. He chuckled at Meg and said, "I didn't expect you to be so dominant at such a young age. Please don't be offended by my visit today." His looks, coupled with his crosstalk accent, made Meg have a much better impression of this uncle. He also chuckled and said, "Master Harris travels the world and doesn't kill nameless people. It's my honor to see a junior like you. Why would I be offended? I'm ashamed to say this, but it's also because I'm in the same trade. I'm just an ordinary chef, and I like to spar with my peers to broaden my knowledge. I didn't expect to cause so much trouble for my peers." Harris sighed with a helpless expression. If I could lose 1 or 2 rounds, I probably wouldn't have such a problem. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly as he heard something familiar. He nodded sympathetically and said, yes. This is really a confusing and distressing matter. Harris looked at Meg in surprise with some scrutiny. He didn't expect this fella to be so good at posturing. So this is a battle between experts. Their realms are indeed unfathomable. That's right. If an ordinary person were to say something like that, it would be pretentious. But when it comes from their mouths, it actually makes sense. From the looks of it, both sides are evenly matched. Please don't consume outdated streamers. The audience watched this scene and discussed in low voices. Meg smiled at Harris and said, Master has set the time, and I have set the venue. Since Master is here in advance, let's decide on the judges and the specific situation of the battle before the battle officially begins. Yesterday, I wrote a letter to a few friends who are famous for being fair in Chaos City, and invited them to be the judges for today's battle. When they arrive later, you can see if they meet your requirements, Harris replied with a smile. Who? A long cry sounded from outside the crowd. Everyone turned around and saw the person sitting on the horse. They exclaimed, It's the city lord. Then, a horse-drawn carriage drove over and stopped beside Michael's horse. A maiden in a red dress alighted from the carriage and glanced at the crowd in front of the restaurant. Then, she turned to the side and nodded slightly at Michael. It's Miss Hill from the Buffett family. Someone recognized that maiden. Soon, another horse-drawn carriage stopped at the side, and Robert alighted from the carriage. He looked at the crowd in front of the restaurant, and smilingly said, I'm not late, right? It's the president of the Food Association, Mr. Robert. Someone recognized him. A quaint black horse-drawn carriage drove over slowly. Menard opened the carriage door, and then respectfully stepped aside. An elderly man with half-white hair alighted from the carriage. It's President Jeffrey from the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Someone in the crowd exclaimed softly. Even the city lord is here. As the principal, it shouldn't be considered as skipping class for me to be a judge during class time, right? A gray horse-drawn carriage stopped, and a tall and thin man alighted from the carriage with a smile. Principal Novin from Chaos School. Everyone exclaimed when they saw Novin alighting from the carriage. Oh my God! What kind of judge lineup is this? This is going to be heavenly. The city lord, the head of the Buffett family, the president of the Food Association, the president of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, and the principal of Chaos School are all here. Is this really just a culinary duel? I think it's worth coming here today even if I get fined 2 days' salary by my boss when I go back. Everyone was already in an uproar when the judge lineup appeared. These people represented the top authority and social class in Chaos City, but they were all gathered together for a culinary duel today. Then, everyone started to look at Harris in a different light. This bald uncle in patched cotton clothes had a shocking social circle. Impressive. Meg looked at the few big bosses who came one after another, and couldn't help but want to give them a thumbs up. Even he wasn't confident that he could get these big bosses to come and stand for him personally. Putting everything else aside, God knew how Harris managed to get Jeffrey to come. Harris, you haven't been to Chaos City for 5 years. The crowd had already parted to make a path for Michael to walk in first, and he smiled at Harris. When I left the last time, I thought I would only come back after 20 years. You should be thanking this young friend. He made me interested in Chaos City again, Harris said honestly. Michael wasn't annoyed. He continued to smile, and said, yes. Mr. Mack is our city's treasure now. Your undefeated record might end here. That's great. I've been waiting for this day for over 20 years. Harris looked at Meg expectantly. Master Harris, my grandfather isn't feeling well, so he asked me to come on his behalf. He invited you to the manor as a guest, Hill said to Harris respectfully. It's all right. You've grown up to be even prettier. I'll invite you instead of him in the future. Harris waved his hand nonchalantly. After some thought, he said, how about tonight? I'll go fishing with him. All right. Hill nodded slightly. Master Harris, we meet again, Robert said to Harris with a smile. Harris looked at Robert seriously, and said, yes. I've even prepared the pot for you. If you want to come with me, we can just carry the pot and go on our way. Why do you have to stay in this mortal world? Chapter 1471. Air. Robert looked embarrassed, and quickly waved his hands. I am the president of the Food Association now. I'm afraid I won't be able to follow you anytime soon. It's all right. I will keep the walk for you. You can look for me anytime when you have thought it through. Harris waved his hands as if he wasn't surprised. He reached out to pat the black walk on Chapman's back, and smilingly said, carrying this black walk means you are part of the Black Walk gang. Ah pooey, the wandering chef gang. This is the last time. Jeffrey looked at Harris. Although he still had a straight face, his expression was much more relaxed than usual. How can you say that? I think you can still live for a few more years, Harris said seriously as he scrutinized Jeffrey. Jeffrey raised his eyebrows slightly, but there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. He pointed at Harris and said, I want to eat dried grilled fish today. If I can't eat it, I will smash your wok. Your request is a little too much. I will try my best to satisfy you, Harris said a little cowardly. Harris, you said you brought books for the children. Where are they? Novin asked Harris with a smile. They are all in the car. I bought them on the way here. There are so many that I am about to sleep against the ceiling. Hurry up and move them away, Harris said gloomily. All right. I will move them away later, Novin said with a smile. Harris leaned closer to Novin and softly said, don't take the wrong books that I put under my pillow. Oh, you. Novin looked at him with disdain, but still nodded without batting an eyelid. Prepare the seats for the judges. Meg turned around to inform Yabamiya. The restaurant door opened, and 5 tables and chairs were quickly arranged in a row in front of the restaurant. Harris turned around to look at Meg, and smilingly asked, young friend, I took the liberty to invite these people. What do you think? Sheer looked at Mag with interest and a hint of mockery in her eyes. I have no objections. It's an honor to be able to invite the judges. Please take a seat. Meg had a smile on his face, but he was cursing in his heart. You fucking invited almost all of the most impressive big shots in Chaos City. What else can I say? Where am I going to find such a big shot? Harris heaved a sigh of relief, and said, that's good. I was worried that you would find it too unimpressive. Meg, the reputation of the invincible god of cooking is not just for show. The same thought appeared in everyone's minds at the same time. After all, anyone who could be so familiar with these people in Chaos City definitely wasn't an ordinary person. The judges took their seats one after another. The atmosphere of the venue had already been ignited by the big shot judges. The scene of these 5 in the same frame was extremely rare. Mr. Mack, I'm looking forward to your performance today, Mr. Hill said with a smile as he walked past Meg. Thank you. Meg nodded slightly. Mr. Mack, you will be Chaos City's hero if you beat him, Michael also reminded him with anticipation as he walked past. Go for it, Mr. Mack. Robert clenched his fists and encouraged him. Jeffrey glanced at Meg thoughtfully, and walked over without saying anything. Mr. Meg, you have to make Chaos City proud, Novin said with a smile. Meg was already feeling a little pressured. Although he wasn't sure how good Harris's culinary skills were, he could tell from Michael and the rest's performance that Harris's culinary skills weren't just for bragging. Of course, the source of his pressure wasn't other people's expectations. It was that if he lost, he would have to carry that ugly black pot and wander around with them. He would even have to call that greasy uncle his master. TSK, how miserable. The judges took their seats, and Harris also came to the center of the venue. He took out a bamboo tube from somewhere, and there were dozens of bamboo sticks with words written on them. He waved at Meg and said, "Young friend, why don't we decide the format of the duel by drawing lots?" The more Meg looked at Harris, the more he felt like a quack. Which chef would carry a bamboo tube around with him? Even the format of the duel was decided by drawing lots. The rumors are true. Master Harris really carries a bamboo tube around with him. Vanessa looked at the bamboo tube in Harris's hand in surprise. "I heard that he even uses this to check the fate of others. Is it accurate?" Abraham asked. "I heard it's quite accurate. You just have to listen to it the other way around. I heard that he previously helped a lady predict her marriage, and said that she wouldn't be fated to be in love in this lifetime. In the end, she met someone the next day, and married the Mr. Right. Then, I think I know why all his disciples have to carry the black pot." Abraham understood. "How are we going to draw lots?" Meg walked down the stairs, and came to Harris. He glanced at the various bamboo sticks in his bamboo tube. They were all labeled with numbers and engraved with words such as, knife skills, soup, frying. It wasn't just limited to the dishes. It included almost all the skills that a chef needed to master. "My bamboo tube contains everything about culinary skills. For the sake of fairness, if there's anything that you're not good at, I can remove them first. Then, each of us will draw lots as the topic of the duel. Then, the judges will draw lots, and it will also be the topic of the duel. There are 3 rounds, and whoever wins 2 rounds will be the winner of this duel," Harris said with a smile. Meg was deep in thought. The choice of the topic of the duel was very creative. He reached out to take Harris's bamboo tube, and picked out dozens of strange items, such as, a big iron pot on the head, a chopping board on the chest, and so on. He nodded, and said, "Let's start from here. You're only taking away these." Harris looked at the 10 odd bamboo skewers in Meg's hand with astonishment. Some of the chefs that he had met previously even left 3 bamboo skewers in the bamboo tube, but Meg only took away 10 odd bamboo skewers, which really surprised him. The rest are the basic skills and conventional dishes of a chef. Shouldn't they be kept? Meg asked in return. "Young friend, you're indeed very interesting. Then, I'll start first." Harris held the bamboo tube with both hands, and started to draw the bamboo sticks in the Demon Emperor's hand with a sincere expression. The audience's eyes were also fixed on the bamboo tube in his hand. It was their first time seeing such a novel duel method. Plop! A bamboo stick fell out of the bamboo tube, and landed on the ground with a loud thud. "It's here." Harris bent down to pick up the bamboo stick. After taking a look, he raised it high above his head, and said, "The first topic, knife skills." Knife skills. Meg was deep in thought. After being trained in the test field for the god of cookery for so long, he was still rather confident in his knife skills. He reached out to take the bamboo tube, and casually shook it a few times. A bamboo stick fell out, and he caught it in midair. He flipped the bamboo stick over to take a look, and raised it above his head as well. Cold dish. Looks like the husband and wife lung slice is going to be useful. Then, the second topic is the cold dish. Harris took the bamboo tube, and walked toward the judge's table. He placed the bamboo tube in front of the hill, and smilingly said, you shall decide for the third topic. All right. The hill directly picked up the bamboo tube and shook it a few times. A bamboo stick flew out and landed on the table. The hill picked up the bamboo stick and took a look. He loudly said, "Soup." Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1472. The first item, knife skills. The second item, cold dish. The third item, soup. Harris kept the 3 bamboo sticks and smilingly asked Meg, "All right, then the 3 items for our duel today are decided. Young friend, do you have any objections?" "No problem." Meg nodded to show that he had no objections. He felt that his knife skills were not bad. In the test field for the god of cookery, his knife skills were heavily monitored for every dish he made. Not to mention other things, just the roast duck alone was already better than many veteran duck cutters who had decades of experience. As for the cold dish, the husband and wife lung slice, which had not been officially released, was naturally the best choice. Although he had not tried it in practice after leaving the test field, Meg was very confident in this dish. As for the soup, of course, it was the highly praised, but a can of Buddha jumps over the wall was hard to come by. Meg was very confident in all 3 items. "Sure. I like people who are straightforward like this, young friend." Harris snapped his fingers, and casually tossed the bamboo stick in his hand into the stick container at the side. He rubbed his hands excitedly, and said to Chapman, who was standing at the side, slowly, "Go and buy groceries." "Same old thing." "All right, master." Chapman nodded, and turned to walk to the bullock cart. He climbed onto the bullock cart and left slowly. He's only going to buy the groceries now. Everyone had a strange expression. This Master Harris was really carefree. Meg also raised his eyebrows slightly. However, he took a look at the time, and realized that it was only 9:45 a.m. The market was in the Aden Square, so it wouldn't take much time to buy the groceries and return. The duel should be able to start at 10 a.m. Harris's other disciples began to lay out the kitchen utensils they had unloaded from the bullock cart. There were very few kitchen utensils, and a set of stove was considered the most advanced. Then, there was a big black iron pot that was even bigger than what the other disciples were carrying. There was also a thick wooden chopping block, a long and thin kitchen knife, and a few crude clay pots with lids. This level of kitchen utensils was about the same as those sold by street vendors. Meg's gaze lingered on that slender cleaver for a while longer. If there was anything valuable among these kitchenware, it would be that cleaver. It was forged from fine iron, and was more intricate than many of the weapons used by knights. It had to have been crafted by a famous master. "Little friend, what do you think of my sori?" Harris seemed to have sensed Meg's gaze. He picked up that cleaver, and waved it in front of Meg as if he was showing off. "Rome made this for me personally." He should have only made one cleaver after he became famous. Hiss. A kitchen knife forged by Master Rome himself. The legendary blacksmith who personally forged Alex's Tian-Du sword. It's not just the Tian-Du sword, at least half of the top 10 weapons on the Norland continent were created by Master Rome. I didn't expect Master Harris's cleaver to be forged by him. There was an uproar among the audience. Their eyes were glowing as they looked at the cleaver in Harris's hands. It was the dream of many knights to obtain a weapon personally forged by a Master Rome, even if it was just a cleaver with a strange name like Sori. Is that so? What a coincidence. My fat head fish was also made by Master Rome. Meg took out his fat head fish, and spun it in his hand before pinning it onto the chopping block next to Harris. A cold gleam flashed across the blade, and it was dazzling under the sunlight. Mr. Mac's cleaver was also made by Master Rome. Everyone stared at the strange-looking cleaver on the chopping board with their mouths agape. It was rectangular, and didn't have any streamlined aesthetic. If the handle was removed, it would look like a brick. However, the forging technique, the unique patterns, and the chilling sharpness made everyone feel that no one else other than Master Rome could forge such a sharp weapon. Has Master Rome changed his profession to making cleavers recently? Abraham muttered to himself. The sword that he had asked Master Abraham for would be waiting years in the future. Fathead fish. Harris looked at Meg's cleaver, and then at the sword in his hands with a strange expression. He didn't expect to be slapped in the face right after he said that. He couldn't help but mumble, "This Rome fellow is not honest." He said that he would never forge a cleaver again. Why did he forge one for this young friend here? This name is quite compatible. Harris chuckled, and changed the topic awkwardly. He looked at Meg, and said, "Young friend, if you have anything to prepare, please start preparing. We agreed to start the duel at 10 o'clock, so let's start right on time." Meg didn't move. Instead, he smiled at Harris, and said, "Before the duel starts, shouldn't we confirm the wager for this duel?" Wager? Harris was stunned for a moment, but his eyes lit up immediately. "You mean to increase the stakes, right? You can understand it that way." Meg nodded. "This suggestion is rather interesting." Harris rubbed his hands together, but then said with some frustration, "But I don't have any money. Why don't you take a look and use whichever pot you like as the wager?" "I don't want your pot." Meg shook his head. A lousy black pot could only be worth a few copper coins. He looked at Harris smilingly, and said, "Why don't we do this? Whoever loses this duel will have to call the other party master." "Call him master," Harris murmured, and pondered seriously. If he really calls the other party master, he will be a junior in the future. If Mr. Mac loses, he won't have to follow Master Harris and wander the world, right? I heard that the 3 gambling dens in the city have already opened bets for this duel. I didn't expect Mr. Mac and Master Harris to bet too. To be honest, I bet 100 copper coins that Mr. Mac will win. Hee hee. I even saw you bet 1,000 copper coins that Master Harris will win. We can't lose money, can we? The audience discussed softly with some excitement amidst their nervousness. A duel where honor was at stake would definitely be very exciting. "Master, please reconsider." Harris's disciples all tried to persuade him. They weren't worried that Harris would call someone else master, but they were more worried that they would suddenly have a grandmaster. "All right, young friend, it's settled then. Whoever loses this duel will call the other party master." Harris looked at Meg with a smile, and nodded. "Young friend, I can see that you are a 1-in-a-million culinary prodigy. If you can travel with me and polish your culinary skills, you will have a bright future. I have a book here, don't, Uncle? We haven't started the duel yet. Don't be in a hurry to take me in as your disciple." Meg was a little helpless. Chapter 1473. After the duel was decided, Meg set a trap for Harris as he wished. It was synchronized with the system's mission. Success or failure depended on this. If he lost, he would have to call the other party master according to the system's punishment. He had nothing to fear. Could this little fellow be thinking of joining my Black Walk gang, becoming my disciple, and learning how to cook from me? Harris looked at Meg thoughtfully, and started to suspect if Meg was playing him. With the help of Mia and the rest, Meg also took out all the kitchen utensils and ingredients that he needed. They were placed opposite Harris's kitchen utensils, and were placed on both sides of the judge's table. "Please make way." When it was almost 10 a.m., Chapman's voice sounded from outside. The bullock cart drove over slowly, and then stopped. Chapman's disciples hurriedly went forward to help unload the cart. There weren't many ingredients, and they could barely fill 2 baskets. They were all very common dishes. After the ingredients were placed on the other side, Meg lifted his hand to look at his watch and calmly said, 10 a.m. All right. Then, let us compete in the first segment, knife skills. Harris didn't procrastinate either. He took 2 potatoes from the basket, placed one beside his hand, and tossed the other in Meg's direction. He then said, knife skills are the basic skills of a chef. The saying, 70% knife skills, 30% heat control, fully demonstrates the importance of knife skills. Here are 2 potatoes, one for you and one for me. The rules are very simple. Within 3 minutes, you have to demonstrate the most exquisite cutting skills you can on this potato. Then, the judges will vote for the potato that they think has the better cutting skills. All right. Meg caught the potato that still had some dirt on it. He didn't have any doubts about Harris's simple and crude rules. Knife skills were delicate work, and every chef was different. Comparing them together was just to see who was more impressive. The scene had already quietened down. Everyone looked at the 2 potatoes in Meg and Harris's hands, and held their breath subconsciously. They all wanted to know what these 2 ordinary potatoes would look like in their hands. Meg tossed the potato up casually, and grabbed the fathead fish with his right hand. The knife flashed, and the potato seemed to be dancing on the tip of the knife. The potato skin with dirt on it rustled down, and in the blink of an eye, a peeled potato was spinning slowly on the tip of the knife. Meanwhile, the potato skin landed on a plate below. The thin layer of skin didn't stick to the potato at all. It was extremely intact. What impressive knife skills! The audience couldn't help but exclaim. That move was so smooth. Although it was just peeling the skin, it was already a technical barrier that couldn't be imitated. Interesting. Harris took a look at Meg. The smile on his face had already disappeared, and his expression was sincere and solemn. He reached out to grab the sori, and placed the knife on the potato. With a gentle flick of his finger, the potato started to spin on the chopping board. Starting from one end of the potato, a complete and long potato skin started to grow rapidly. In the blink of an eye, a complete peeled potato appeared on the chopping block. There was also a complete potato skin that was about 1 centimeter wide at the side. This is probably the so-called operation that the eyes can learn, but definitely can't do. The audience was also a little speechless when they saw that. Both parties had shown their skills. Just peeling the potato was already very impressive. Meg didn't pay attention to Harris's actions and the audience's voices. He held the knife in his hand, and only had eyes for the potato in front of him. Although it looked like a complete potato on the surface, it had already been deconstructed countless times in his eyes before he decided on the most flashy plan. The knife rose and fell. The kitchen knife that looked heavy and thick was as delicate as an embroidery needle in Meg's hands. It was sometimes fast and sometimes slow. He was either cutting or peeling, just like a master carving the most exquisite piece of art. That focused look of his made people moved, and they couldn't bear to disturb him. A serious man indeed looks rather charming. The Hill looked at Meg with interest. He could almost imagine him looking like this when he was drawing those intricate blueprints. Otherwise, how could he complete such a huge project all by himself? No wonder Mr. Mag has progressed so quickly. This level of concentration is extremely rare for a chef. Robert was also looking at Mag with an expression of awe and admiration. Jeffrey was also looking at Meg with a slight frown. He had received some news that this Mr. Mac had an unusual relationship with Gloria. Perhaps he was the fashion designer behind Suede. Suede was able to emerge as a new force to be reckoned with, and become the leader of Chaos City's fashion industry in just a few months, all because of those uniquely styled clothes. The clothes that broke the shackles of tradition and were full of design left those old-fashioned tailors in Chaos City in the dust. As a businessman who started his business with textiles, he could see the core of Suede's rapid growth and high profits at a glance. That hidden designer was equivalent to the soul of Suede. And this soul was now holding a kitchen knife and cutting the potatoes seriously. Recently, there were some rumors saying that this Mr. Mac was also very close to the hill. Even he had heard of Mamie's name before. It was just that he didn't want to lower himself to line up for a meal, so he hadn't tried it himself yet. Such a young man with so many identities had indeed piqued his interest. Furthermore, Meg had once said that he was going to overthrow the Aden Chamber of Commerce. That made him even more interested. "Please, boss, you must win." Yabamiya clenched her fists nervously. She no longer thought that Meg could win against Harris easily. All the ladies in the restaurant were a little nervous. This was a battle that concerned Mamie's honor. 3 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. Following a clank from the judge's table, Meg and Harris stopped cutting their knives almost at the same time. "What's that?" "A golden dragon," everyone exclaimed as they looked at the potato that Meg had placed on the plate. It had already been carved into a giant dragon that was about to fly. The customers who were closer could clearly see the distinct dragon scales on the dragon's wings. Even the dragon's eyes seemed to be full of life. They were so lifelike that it felt like it would fly away from the plate any time. What was most astonishing was that Mag had used a kitchen knife that was as thick as a brick, and it only took him 3 minutes to create such a work of art. On the other hand, the potatoes on Harris's side were divided into many different shapes and sizes. They were placed on an open plate, and looked a little messy as if a child had cut them up randomly. It was a world of difference compared to Meg's lifelike giant dragon. Did Master Harris just give up on the first round? Everyone couldn't help but wonder. Chapter 1474. Meg and Harris each carried their cut potatoes to the judge's table. Everyone looked at Meg's lifelike golden potato dragon, and then looked at the small potato pieces that Harris placed messily on his plate. They already had an idea of who was better. There seemed to be no suspense in this first round. "Why does this golden dragon look so familiar?" Yabamiya mumbled softly. "It was carved according to you," Elizabeth, who was standing beside her, said softly. "Ha!" Yabamiya was stunned for a moment before a blush appeared on her face. Harris stood in front of the judge's table, and spread his hands in a gentlemanly manner, saying, "My young friend, after you." Meg glanced at the potato pieces that were placed messily on his plate. Every piece was different in size and shape, as if they were chopped by a child. He couldn't help but raise his brow. Is he going to give me a 1 versus 2 chance? This was a duel with his honor and his master on the line. No matter what the other party did, he didn't have any intention of underestimating them. He carefully placed the plate in the middle of the judge's table, and then took a step back. Harris went forward, and also placed an open plate of paper next to Meg's plate. Mr. Mac's golden dragon carving is very lifelike. To be able to carve such an intricate golden dragon out of a potato in such a short period of time, I can see how amazing his knife skills are, Michael, who was sitting in the middle, praised as he looked at Meg's golden dragon carving. Robert went forward to take a closer look, and couldn't help but praise. The details of the dragon scales and whiskers are very clear, and the proportions are also very exquisite. Mr. Mac's potato carving skills are probably even better than some carvers. Jeffrey stared at the golden dragon for a while, and then looked at Meg with surprise. He had seen many geniuses in his life, and they could often do things that ordinary people couldn't do in a certain field. However, there was a limit to a person's energy and talent. No one could do many things well at the same time, and most people couldn't even juggle their life and work. However, Meg's extraordinary talent in cooking, sculpting, fashion design, and some other areas that he didn't understand really surprised him. Is there anything he can't do? The hill looked at Meg with great interest. As a woman who had been shrouded in the halo of a genius since she was young and grew up in praise, she gradually became interested in Meg after seeing him. Novin looked at Meg's golden dragon before his gaze landed on Harris's potato platter. He seemed to be deep in thought, and smiled without saying anything. There was a faint smile on Meg's lips. He didn't need to say anything. His knife skills had already been displayed on this giant dragon. Those who could understand would naturally understand, and those who couldn't, wouldn't understand even if he said it. Harris, what kind of trick are you playing now? Michael wasn't in a hurry to make a judgment, and turned to ask Harris. Everyone present also looked at Harris curiously. With his reputation and abilities, he shouldn't be surrendering just like that, right? Young friend, you're done with your demonstration? Harris asked Meg with a smile. Yes. Meg nodded. He was sculpting this golden dragon, and had nothing else to show. However, judging from Harris's words, what else did he have to show apart from these potato pieces? This piqued Meg's curiosity. Alright, then it's my turn to perform. Harris smilingly pointed at the potatoes on the plate and said, "Look, they are just a pile of potatoes now." Then, he waved his hand at the potato platter, and the potato pieces that were originally scattered on the large plate suddenly moved. They piled up together like building blocks, and in the blink of an eye, they turned into a golden dragon. Harris smilingly said, "Look, it has become a giant dragon now." Wow! There was an uproar instantly. Everyone's eyes lit up as they looked at the giant dragon that was almost the same as Meg's golden dragon. They looked at this scene in disbelief. Building blocks. Meg also looked surprised. It wasn't just because Harris was a spatial magic caster, but also because he could use the scattered potato pieces to form a golden dragon. Although there was a big gap between the details of the carvings and that of his dragon, his understanding of the structure and the potato pieces that he had cut were beyond everyone's imagination. He could be sure that these potatoes didn't change their shape at all during the reconstruction process. They were just stacked together in the simplest way. It was a very amazing way. Of course, it can also be a pig. Harris tapped the head of the giant dragon gently, and the giant dragon collapsed. Then, it quickly piled up again, and became a fat and round wow. So impressive. There was a wave of exclamations and applause instantly. Is this magic? How did he turn the giant dragon into a pig? Yabamiya blinked in disbelief. It's spatial magic. However, he only used magic to stack the potato pieces that he had cut together. He has an amazing understanding of these potato pieces that he had cut. Moreover, he must have calculated the thickness and size of each potato piece. That's why he could use them to form anything. Elizabeth was also amazed. Barbara, aren't you a spatial magic caster? Can you? Jane asked softly as she looked at Barbara. Of course I can. Barbara coughed softly with an unnatural expression. Then, Harris changed the potato pieces into 3 to 4 different forms. With a wave of his hand, countless potato pieces scattered on the plate again. It was still that plate of potato pieces that looked messy and disorderly. However, this plate of potato pieces had become different in everyone's eyes now. It represented endless changes and also endless possibilities. Thank you, thank you. Harris cupped his fists with a smile. Then, he looked at the judges and said, "The performance has ended. Now, please make your choice." Meg also looked at the judges. Even he was amazed by Harris's move. It was unknown what the result would be. Harris, your block cutting is getting more and more varied. It seems like your cutting skills have improved a lot over the years. I have to vote for you this time, Novan said with a smile. Harris chuckled and said, in the past 5 years, I have increased the number of pieces from 180 to 360 pieces. Basically, I can change them into any form. Of course, it's different. Grandpa once said that Master Harris's block gourmet food has endless variations, and it's very interesting to eat. It's hard to find another person like him in this world. Now that I've seen him today, he really lives up to his reputation. I'll vote for you this time, too. The Hill also praised. Just because of what you said, I really have to go and see that old man Ian tonight, Harris said with a smile. Michael pointed at Meg with a smile and said, Harris's blocks are still so interesting. However, I feel that the giant dragon carved by Mr. Mack is more exquisite. His cutting skills must be very good to be able to do such a delicate operation with a wide cleaver. I'll vote for Mr. Mack. Master Harris's control and understanding of ingredients is something that very few chefs in the world can surpass. However, if we're talking about cutting skills today, the superb skills and precision that Mr. Mack displayed have moved me. Hence, I'll vote for Mr. Mack. Robert also raised his hand to signal to Meg to tie. Everyone's gaze landed on Jeffrey. His choice would determine the outcome of the first round. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.